Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto is summoned to DxD by Ophis to become her mate? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Silence and the Sage. The last rays of the sun bled across the sky, painting the Hokage monument in hues of burnt orange and deep violet. From his office, Naruto Uzumaki watched the light fade, the familiar faces carved into the mountain seeming to soften in the twilight. The village below was settling into a peaceful evening rhythm. Lanterns flickered to life along the main thoroughfares, casting warm pools of light onto streets bustling with people heading home from work, children chasing each other with bursts of laughter, the scent of evening meals wafting up from 100 different homes. It was the picture of peace. The very peace he had bled for, fought for, and nearly died for countless times. His desk was a mountain range of paper. Mission reports, trade agreements with Suna, budget proposals for the academy, requests for public works in the outer districts. Each scroll and document was a brick in the foundation of the era of peace he had helped build. He picked up a formal request from the land of Fire's daimyo for an official state visit and stamped it with the Hokage's seal. Approved. His movements were practiced, efficient, the culmination of years spent in this chair. Yet, as he set the scroll aside, a familiar restlessness stirred in his chest. It was a low, quiet hum, a dissonance he couldn't quite name. Getting bored, are we? A deep, rumbling voice echoed in the cavernous space of his mind. Naruto leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning in protest. He closed his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. Shut up, Kurama. I'm not bored. I'm content. A guttural laugh, like stones grinding together, answered him. You're a terrible liar. Always have been. Contentment looks different on you. This is the quiet after the storm, and you're a creature of the storm, Naruto. Don't try to deny it. He couldn't. Not really. Kurama knew him better than anyone. The great fox had been his prisoner, his weapon, his burden, and now, his oldest and truest friend. Their connection was no longer a cage and a captive, but a shared space, a silent understanding that transcended words. Kurama felt the thrum of Six Paths Sage Mode that was now Naruto's natural state, a constant, TLE awareness of the life force of the entire planet. He also felt the faint, persistent ache beneath it all. Naruto opened his eyes and looked around the office. A framed picture of Team 7 sat on the corner of his desk, a much younger him, grinning like an idiot, next to a brooding Sasuke and a hopeful Sakura, with Kakashi-sensei standing behind them, his visible eye curved in a smile. Next to it was a photo of him with Hinata and their two children, Boruto and Himawari, taken just last week. His family, his precious people, he had everything he had ever dreamed of. The village's acknowledgement, the respect of the world. A family that loved him. He was the seventh Hokage. His dream was real, so why did it feel like he was waiting for something? He stood, stretching his arms high above his head until his back popped. The paperwork could wait. Shikamaru would grumble, but Shikamaru was always grumbling about something. He needed some air. He slipped on the iconic Hokage Haori, the white fabric with red flames licking at the bottom, feeling as natural as his own skin. Where are you going? Kurama asked, a note of lazy curiosity in his tone. Just for a walk, Naruto replied, both aloud and in his mind. Need to clear my head. He vanished from the office in a silent flicker, reappearing on the rooftop. The night air was cool and crisp. He took a deep breath, the sense of the village filling his lungs, wood smoke. Ramen from Ichiraku's, the damp earth of the surrounding forests. He could feel it all. In Sage Mode, the world was a symphony of life. He could feel the chakra of every person in the village, a unique signature for each soul. He could feel the steady, ancient pulse of the trees in the forests that cradled Konoha, the quiet flow of the river. It was a connection that once he could only achieve through intense meditation. Now, it was as easy as breathing. He walked along the rooftops, his footsteps making no sound. He was a ghost in his own village, an observer. He saw Iruka-sensei leaving the academy, laughing with another instructor. He saw Choji and Karui arguing good-naturedly over where to eat dinner, their daughter Chocho trailing behind them, already munching on a bag of chips. He saw the new generation, kids who had been born into this peace, who thought of the fourth great ninja war as a story from a history book, not a living nightmare. This was his victory. Every smiling face, every peaceful evening, was a testament to the sacrifices that had been made. But with the title of Hokage came a strange kind of isolation. He was no longer just Naruto, the knuckle-headed ninja. He was a symbol, the seventh. Villagers would bow their heads respectfully as he passed, their eyes filled with awe and admiration. They loved him, he knew that. But he easy camaraderie he'd had as a genin was gone, replaced by a deferential distance. Only his closest friends, Sasuke, Sakura, Shikamaru, Hinata, still treated him like the person he was beneath the hat. Everyone else saw the monument. His stroll led him, as it often did, to a quiet, somber corner of the village. The memorial stone. It stood sleek and black, a shard of polished midnight under the moonlight. The names of the fallen etched into its surface in stark white. Here, the cheerful sounds of the village seemed to fade, replaced by a respectful hush. Here, the weight of his title felt the most real. He knelt, his fingers gently tracing the familiar grooves of names. Minato Namikaze, Kushina Uzumaki, his parents, whom he'd known for only a few precious moments. Jiraiya, his master, his godfather. The man who had shaped him more than any other. His throat tightened. Neji Hyuga, a friend who had died to protect him, to protect the future. The list went on and on. Asuma Sarutobi, countless others, each name a story cut short, each one a price paid for the peace he now guarded. Hey, pervy sage, he whispered, his voice low. It's all good. The village is doing great. The kids are all strong. Just thought you should know. He closed his eyes, resting his forehead against the cool stone. In this place, surrounded by the memory of the dead, he could finally let the mask of the Hokage fall away. He was just Naruto, a man who missed his friends, a son who missed his parents, a student who missed his master. Here, the victory felt hollow, the cost achingly high. The silence of the memorial ground was a different kind of quiet from the one in his office. This one was heavy. It was filled with ghosts. It was in this moment of profound, vulnerable connection to his past that the world began to unravel. It didn't start with a sound or a flash of light. It started with a feeling of cessation. The gentle chirping of crickets in the nearby grass abruptly stopped. The distant hum of the village vanished. Not as if it were getting quieter, but as if it had been erased. The wind died. The very air grew still, heavy, and unnaturally cold. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He shot to his feet. His body instantly coiled for a fight. Kurama, I feel it, the fox growled, his voice a blade of honed steel. This isn't natural. It's not a genjutsu. The energy, it's just gone. Naruto's six paths sage mode was screaming at him. His senses, which could normally feel the life force of the entire continent, were being compressed, choked off. The vibrant tapestry of life energy was fraying at the edges, dissolving into a uniform, silent gray. He looked down at his hands. The color was draining from his skin, from the vibrant orange of his jacket, from the world itself. The rich greens of the grass, the deep black of the memorial stone, all were fading into shades of ash. What is this? He demanded, his voice sharp. He spun around, trying to pinpoint a source, an enemy, anything. But there was nothing. It was reality itself that was coming undone. A wave of absolute nothingness was washing over his world, unmaking it. He could feel the life signatures of the villagers flickering out, not dying, but simply ceasing to be in his perception. The panic that should have been there was held at bay by years of training, of facing down gods and monsters. He focused, pushing his chakra out, trying to push back against the encroaching void. It was like trying to hold back the ocean with his bare hands. The nothingness had no substance to fight, no energy to counter. It was the absolute absence of everything. The last bastion of color and sound was the small circle of ground he stood on. Beyond it, a silent, grayscale abyss stretched into infinity. The Hokage monument, the village, the sky, all gone. The only thing left was him and the memorial stone. Naruto, brace yourself. Whatever this is, it's targeting you. Kurama roared. The stone itself began to dissolve, the etched names blurring and fading like sand in the wind. The last thing Naruto saw was the name Jiraiya before it too was consumed by the silent, colorless void. Then, the ground beneath his feet was gone, and he was falling, not down, but into an endless, silent emptiness. He didn't fight it. There was nothing to fight. He simply gathered his power around him like a cloak, a blazing sun of golden energy in an ocean of absolute zero. And waited. He came to awareness not with a jolt, but with a slow bleed of sensory information. He wasn't falling anymore. He was floating. He opened his eyes and found himself suspended in a place that defied logic. It was a space, but it had no dimensions. It was an endless, swirling kaleidoscope of deep purples, cosmic blues, and nebular pinks, yet there were no stars, no planets, no light source. The colors seemed to generate their own light, shifting and flowing like ink in water. The silence was the most profound thing he had ever experienced. It was more than a lack of sound. It was a presence, a physical pressure against his skin, his eardrums. In Konoha, even in the deepest meditation, there was always the hum of natural energy. Here, there was nothing. No life, no nature, no energy, just a void. He did a quick mental check. His body was intact. He could breathe, though he wasn't sure what he was breathing. His chakra pathways were clear, and Kurama's vast reserves were thrumming within him, a furnace of power ready to be unleashed. The golden cloak of his six paths sage mode flickered around him, the only source of warmth in the oppressive stillness. He was calm. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Okay, he said, his own voice sounding alien and loud in the crushing silence. So, where the hell am I? This place feels wrong, Kurama stated. His mental voice a low growl. It feels old, older than the world, older than anything. Naruto slowly turned, scanning the impossible panorama. And then he saw her. She was the only other solid thing in the void. Floating a dozen meters away was a girl who looked no older than 12 or 13. She had long, impossibly black hair that drifted around her as if she were underwater, and pale, almost luminous skin. Her eyes, a flat, emotionless gray, were fixed on him. She wore a simple, black gothic Lolita dress with white frills, an outfit so out of place in this cosmic emptiness that it was jarring. She didn't radiate any energy he could recognize, not chakra, not demonic energy, not holy power. She simply was. Her presence was an undeniable fact, a point of absolute stability in the shifting chaos of the void. For a long moment, they simply observed each other. Naruto's mind raced, analyzing, preparing. Was this an enemy? A god? A new Otsutsuki? She made no move to attack. Her expression was completely neutral, a blank slate that revealed nothing. Finally, she spoke. Her voice didn't travel through the space to reach him. It simply appeared in his mind, clear as a bell, yet utterly devoid of emotion. You are Naruto Uzumaki. It was a statement, not a question. You have me at a disadvantage, Naruto replied, his body language relaxed but ready. You know my name, but I don't know yours. And I'm pretty sure this isn't my living room. Care to explain? I am Ophis, the girl said. And this is my home. The dimensional gap. Dimensional gap, Kurama scoffed. Sounds like something a bored god would name his basement. Naruto ignored him. Ophis. Dimensional gap. Right. That clears up absolutely nothing. Why did you bring me here? That little trick you pulled, unmaking my village. That's not a friendly way to say hello. I did not unmake your world, she stated, her gray eyes unwavering. I simply pulled you out of it. Your perception of its dissolution was a side effect of the transition. Your world remains as it was. Naruto's brow furrowed. That made a degree of sense. It hadn't felt like an attack. It had felt like being carefully excised from reality. He relaxed his stance a fraction. Okay, so, the big question remains. Why? I have been watching you, Ophis said. For a long time. I do not watch many worlds, but yours was interesting. The flow of its energy is unique. So is your soul. My soul. Yes. She tilted her head, a gesture so small and subtle it was almost unnoticeable. Within you, there is another. A great and powerful being. The nine-tailed fox. In most, such a being would be a prisoner, a source of power to be controlled and dominated. But you made it your friend. You share your soul, your mind, your power. You are two, yet you are one. A perfect partnership. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. She could sense his connection with Kurama on that deep of a level. Not just the power, but the nature of their bond. You understand, Ophis continued, her voice still flat, but with an underlying current of something. It wasn't an emotion he could name, but it was there. You understand what it is to hold a universe of power inside you. And still feel alone. That struck him with the force of a physical blow. Her words hit the exact center of the vague emptiness he'd been feeling for months, for years. To be surrounded by people but separate. To be a vessel of immense power that no one could truly comprehend. He had Kurama, but before their friendship was forged, that loneliness had been the defining feature of his entire life. What do you want, Ophis? He asked, his voice softer now. I want my home back, she said simply. I want the silence. Before Naruto could ask what she meant, the void around them shifted. The swirling colors warped and twisted, and an image, a vision, was projected into the space before them. He saw a titanic, serpentine dragon, its scales the color of obsidian, its eyes the same gray as the girl's. It was Ophis's true form, a being of impossible scale, radiating an aura of infinity. And he saw what she was fighting. It was another dragon, even larger, if such a thing was possible. Its form was less defined, a roaring, chaotic mass of pure crimson energy and apocalyptic power. It was the color of blood and rage, the embodiment of a dream so powerful it warped reality around it. Great Red, the dragon of dragons, the apocalypse dragon. The two beings weren't trading blows in a conventional sense. There were no claws, no fire, no physical impacts. Their battle was one of concepts. Ophis would exert her presence, and the void would become still, orderly, infinite, and silent. Great Red would roar, a soundless roar that shook the fabric of existence, and reality would flood with chaos. With color, with impossible shapes and maddening dreams. It was a struggle between the infinite and the dream, between absolute stillness and endless chaos. The vision faded, leaving Naruto in the swirling colors of the gap once more. He is Great Red, Ophis stated. He invaded my home. He fills it with his noise, his dreams. He pushes me out. I want him gone. I want my silence back. That is all I have ever wanted. Naruto processed this. Her goal wasn't conquest or destruction. It was the simple, primal desire of a creature wanting its territory back. A desire for peace and quiet. It was an incredibly, almost childishly simple motive for a being of such obvious power. You're strong enough to fight a monster like that, Naruto said. Why do you need me? Our power is equal, Ophis explained. We are two opposing concepts. We will push against each other for eternity. Neither can win. But you are different. You are a third variable. An outsider. Your power comes from a different source. A different system entirely. She paused, and her gray eyes seemed to look right through him, into the core of his being. But it is not your power I need. It is your nature. You connect with others. You understand them. You change them. I have seen you do it. You turned enemies into friends. You turned monsters into allies. You turned hatred into understanding. She was talking about Gaara. About Nagato. About Obito. Even about Kurama himself. He had never won his greatest battles by simply overpowering his foes. He had won by reaching into their hearts. Finding the pain and loneliness that festered there, and showing them another way. I cannot understand Great Red, Ophis said, and for the first time, a flicker of something like frustration touched her voice. He is pure dream, pure chaos. I cannot connect with him. But you can. You can understand a being of great power. You can speak to the heart of the beast inside. She floated closer, space between them shrinking until she was just a few feet away. Her small, pale hand lifted, and she pointed a finger not at his head, but at his heart. I do not want a weapon, Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice clear and precise. I have enough power. I want a partner, a mate, someone to share the silence with when it is reclaimed. Help me find my peace. She then offered him something he never thought he would hear again. And I, in turn, can offer you a place where you can simply be. Not the Hokage, not the savior, not a symbol, just Naruto. A place where the storm is not just a memory, but a horizon. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Naruto stood motionless in the void, Ophis's words echoing in his mind. A partner, a mate, a place to simply be. It was an offer that targeted every single one of his hidden insecurities, his quietest dissatisfactions. This is insane, Kurama rumbled. She's a dragon goddess from another dimension asking you to be her boyfriend, so why? Oh, you can help her kick out her noisy roommate. You're the Hokage. You have a family, a village. I know that, Naruto shot back internally, his thoughts a whirlwind. But was Kurama right? Could he just abandon everything? His family, Hinata, Boruto, Himawari. The thought sent a sharp pang of guilt through him. No, he could never abandon them. He looked at Ophis, truly looked at her. Beneath the veneer of cosmic power and emotionless calm, he saw it. In the depths of her gray eyes, he saw a loneliness so profound, so ancient, it made his own childhood feel like a fleeting moment of sadness. She had been alone for eons, in this silent, empty space. Her entire existence was a struggle to reclaim the only comfort she had ever known. He saw himself in her. The outcast child sitting on the swing, watching other families. Yearning for a connection he couldn't have. I can't abandon my world, Naruto said aloud, his voice firm. My family, my friends, they are everything to me. Time flows differently here, Ophis replied, as if she had anticipated his objection. And I can create gateways. You would not be abandoning them. You could return. The path would always be open. This is not an exile. It is an invitation to a new adventure, a new purpose. The village was safe. It had been for years. Sasuke was there, his power rivaling Naruto's own. Kakashi, Sakura, Shikamaru, they were all brilliant and strong. The world was at peace, the alliances holding strong. His role as Hokage was becoming more about politics and paperwork than protection. He was a guardian watching over a fortress that was no longer under siege. The part of him that was a fighter, a savior, a storm, it was restless. He thought about the future. Decades of meetings, treaties, and bureaucracy. Growing old behind a desk while his power, the power of a god, lay dormant within him. Was that the end of his story? The kid has a point, Kurama said, his tone shifting from suspicion to grudging consideration. This place, this challenge, it's on a scale beyond anything we've ever faced. And the girl, she's not lying. There's no malice in her. Just a want, a need. Naruto met Ophis's gaze. He saw her simple, honest plea. She wasn't trying to manipulate him. She had laid her entire being bare before him, offering him a partnership of equals. She needed help, and she had chosen him not for his strength, but for his heart. How could he turn away from that? It was the very essence of who he was. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine, unburdened smile he'd worn in a long time. It was the smile of the boy who had sworn to become Hokage, the thrill of an impossible challenge lighting up his eyes. All right, Ophis, he said. You've got a deal, but we do this on my terms. Ophis's eyes widened, just a fraction. It was the most emotion she had shown yet. Your terms. That's right, Naruto said, his voice ringing with newfound energy and confidence. First, I am your partner, not your tool. My decisions are my own. Second, my priority will always be to understand our enemy first. I won't kill this great red unless there is absolutely no other choice. We're going to try talking to him first. He floated closer, crossing the final gap between them. He looked down at the small, ancient being before him. Third, he said, his voice softening. You're going to have to learn to deal with some noise. Because I'm not a very quiet person. And where I go, my friends tend to follow. If we're partners, we're in this together. No more being alone. He held out his hand. A simple, open gesture of trust. Ophis stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Her own small, pale hand rose slowly, hesitantly. She placed it in his. Her skin was cool, but not cold. As their fingers clasped, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor went through her. A small, gray eye, which had been emotionless for millennia, now held a flicker of something new. Hope, I accept your terms, she whispered. Her voice in his mind now holding a trace of warmth. As their pact was sealed, a shockwave, not of energy, but of pure concept, rippled out from the dimensional gap. It was the collision of two realities. The merging of two destinies. A signature that was utterly alien had just been permanently bound to one of this universe's primal forces. Far away, in a realm of perfect order and blinding white light, a vast celestial observatory chimed with a soft, urgent tone it had not made in millennia. An angelic being, clad in radiant armor forged from solidified law, turned his head. His face was beautiful and severe. His 7 pairs of wings folded neatly behind him. This was Metatron, the voice of God. Before him, a pane of ethereal light shimmered into existence, displaying a single line of golden script. Anomaly detected. Foreign conceptual signature. Origin unknown. A moment later, the script updated. Signature bound to concept. Infinity. Trajectory. Terra, Sector Japan. Metatron's serene expression did not change, but a cold, analytical light glinted in his eyes. Infinity, the chaotic, unbound principle embodied by the Ouroboros dragon, had just acquired a new, unknown variable. Order abhorred variables. With a simple, elegant gesture, he issued a silent command. A lesser angel, a watcher, was dispatched. The anomaly would be identified. It would be analyzed. And, if necessary, it would be sterilized. The grand, silent work of maintaining celestial order had to continue. Back in the dimensional gap, Naruto felt a surge of energy, not just his own, but a new kind flowing into him from Ophis. It was the feeling of a new beginning. So, he said, grinning brightly. Where do we start? Ophis pointed, and a tear in the swirling colors of the void appeared. Through it, Naruto could see a night sky, city lights, and the dark silhouette of school buildings. We start there, Ophis said. Kuo Town. It is a place of high supernatural activity. A good place for you to acclimate without drawing too much mortal attention. I have prepared a residence for you. Naruto nodded, his golden aura flaring with anticipation. He gave her hand a final squeeze before letting go. He looked back one last time into the endless, beautiful void. His home was waiting for him, whenever he needed it. But for now, a new adventure was calling. He took a breath and stepped through the gateway, leaving the silence of the void for the noise of a new world. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Fox Among Devils. The transition was like stepping through a cool curtain of water. One moment, Naruto was in the swirling, silent chaos of the dimensional gap. The next, he was standing on solid ground, the mundane symphony of a terrestrial night washing over him. The air was heavy with humidity and the faint, metallic tang of a distant city. Crickets chirped in a frantic, unseen chorus. A lone dog barked somewhere down the street. The sheer, vibrant normality of it all was a stark contrast to the profound emptiness of Ophis's home. He stood in the manicured front yard of a large, Western-style estate. It was a 2-story building of dark wood and gray stone, with large windows that were all dark. It looked clean, well-maintained, but also utterly lifeless, like a house from an architectural magazine rather than a home. It was surrounded by a high stone wall, cocooning it from the quiet suburban street beyond. Ophis materialized beside him, her small form as silent and unobtrusive as a shadow. She looked at the house with her usual blank expression. This will suffice. The P. Roper T is shielded from mortal perception and most forms of supernatural scrying. It is a quiet place. Naruto glanced from the sterile-looking house to the tiny, ancient being next to him. A small smile played on his lips. It's perfect, Ophis. Thank you. He meant it. For her, this was a gesture of profound hospitality. Quiet is one word for it, Kurama grumbled from the vast space of their shared mind. Looks more like a mausoleum. You sure she's not trying to bury you alive in here? Be nice, Naruto chided gently. Her entire existence has been about silence and being alone. This is what comfort looks like to her. He could feel the truth of it. The estate felt less like a home and more like a carefully constructed pocket of stillness, a miniature dimensional gap carved out of the noisy fabric of the world. He walked up the stone path to the front door and pushed it open. It swung inward without a sound. The interior was just as he expected. Minimalist, impeccably clean, and RNISHED with expensive but impersonal pieces. A grand staircase dominated the foyer, leading up to a shadowed second floor. Everything was in shades of black, white, and gray. There wasn't a single picture on the walls, not a single plant. Not a speck of dust. Feel free to redecorate, Ophis said from behind him, her tone flat. It was impossible to tell if she was being sincere or sarcastic. Given what he knew of her, he guessed the former. Naruto chuckled. It could use a little color. Maybe a plant. A really big pot of ramen for the kitchen table. Ophis tilted her head. Ramen. It's the food of the gods. Naruto declared with a completely straight face. I'll make you some. It'll change your life. For the first time, a flicker of genuine curiosity crossed her features. A bold claim. It's a bold food. He left her in the foyer and began to explore his new temporary home, his senses fully extended. The house was a blank slate, but the world outside was anything but. His 6 paths sage mode, which in his world had connected him to the pure, natural energy of the planet, was now picking up a dozen different conflicting signals. It was like listening to a calm orchestra, raw and suddenly having 3 different rock bands start playing at full volume. There was the natural energy, the lifeblood of the planet, but it was thinner here, more subdued. Woven through it were other, more aggressive energies. To the east, concentrated in what looked like a large school complex, was a thick, cloying energy that felt seductive and vaguely corrupting. It was dark, but not inherently evil, like shadows on a moonless night. To the south, near a small, traditional shrine, was a thread of something else. It was sharp, clean, and rigid, an energy of pure order and faith. It felt bright and warm, but also unyieldingly dogmatic, like a brilliant light that casts very harsh shadows. And then there were the others. Scattered throughout the town were pockets of a third major energy, a strange hybrid that felt like a bitter fusion of the first 2. And beneath it all, faint but powerful, were draconic signatures, ancient and prideful. This world is noisy, he murmured, running a hand through his blonde hair as he stood in the center of a large, empty living room. Noisy is an understatement, Kurama agreed. That dark energy feels like the Uchiha's hatred, but without the focus. The light one is like the first Hokage's sage art, but stripped of all its connection to nature and turned into a weapon. This place is a mess. What are they? Naruto asked, turning to Ophis, who had followed him into the room. Devils, angels, and fallen angels, she stated simply. They fight. They have been fighting for a very long time. Their war spills over, creating noise. It is tiresome. Devils and angels. The words sounded like something out of Jiraiya's more imaginative stories. Yet he could feel the reality of them pressing in on the town. It was a powder keg, a delicate, unspoken truce held in a place teeming with ancient power. And he, an utterly foreign element, had just been dropped right into the middle of it. Right. Devils, angels, and a dragon god's noisy roommate problem, Naruto said with a sigh. Never a dull moment. He clapped his hands together, the sound sharp and definitive in the silent house. Well, no point sitting around. I'm going to go for a walk. Get the lay of the land. I will remain here, Ophis said, already drifting towards a large, black leather couch. She sat down, her small feet not even touching the floor, and folded her hands in her lap. She looked like a lost doll in a giant's house. The energies of this world are abrasive. I prefer the silence. Naruto nodded in understanding. All right, don't wait up. He stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind him. The night had deepened. He took a moment, standing in the yard, and let his senses truly sink into his new environment. He closed his eyes, filtering out the chaotic supernatural signatures and focusing on the town itself. He could feel the ebb and flow of human life, the rhythmic breathing of thousands of sleeping people, the hum of electricity in the power lines, the rumble of a late-night train miles away. He could pinpoint every living creature within a multi-kilometer radius, from the smallest insect to the largest mammal. He was a stranger here, but the fundamental pulse of life was a language he would always understand. He chose a direction at random and started walking, his pace easy and relaxed. He didn't use any advanced techniques, just moved like a normal person, wanting to see this new world at its own pace. The streets of Kuo were quiet, lined with neat houses and carefully trimmed hedges. It was peaceful on the surface, but Naruto could feel the tension underneath. The coiled power sleeping behind thin veils of mundane reality. His senses drew him, inevitably, toward the largest concentration of that dark, devilish energy, Kuo Academy. He found himself standing outside its locked gates, looking at the sprawling campus. The main building was a mix of old and new architecture, looming like a sleeping giant in the dark. It was here, he sensed, that the local power base resided. This was their territory, a clan of some sort. He could feel about a dozen distinct signatures within, each one a different flavor of that same dark power. One was clearly the leader. Her energy was potent, refined, and carried an air of regal authority. He lingered for a moment, committing the signatures to memory, then moved on. He was an intelligence gatherer by trade. After all, the first step in any new situation was to understand the players on the board. His walk took him through a small park. The moon was high now, casting long shadows from the trees. The air was still. It was in this manufactured slice of nature that he felt the first spike of real hostility. It wasn't directed at him. It was a burst of raw, uncontrolled killing intent, followed by a surge of that same dark energy, but this felt different from what he'd sensed at the school. It was wild, corrupted, like a rabid animal. Then, he heard it. A scream. A human scream, sharp with terror. Naruto didn't hesitate. The easygoing civilian persona vanished, replaced by the honed instinct of a warrior. In one moment he was standing on the park path. In the next, he was a silent, invisible blur. Leaping from shadow to shadow, treetop to treetop, closing the distance in seconds. The sounds of a struggle grew louder, a wet, guttural snarling, the splintering of wood, and the frantic, desperate gasps of someone running for their life. He arrived at the source in a clearing near a public fountain. The scene was grim. A young man in a business suit lay on the ground, his chest torn open, his blood pooling on the pristine grass. A few feet away, a young woman had stumbled, her ankle clearly broken. She was scrambling backward, her face a mask of pure horror, as a monster loomed over her. It was vaguely humanoid, with long, gangly limbs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its skin was the color of old bruises, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its head as a nightmarish fusion of a bat and an insect, with multiple glowing red eyes and a jaw that unhinged to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. It dripped a black, viscous saliva that sizzled when it hit the ground. This, Naruto surmised, was a stray devil, a being consumed by its own power. The monster raised a clawed hand, preparing to strike the terrified woman down. Naruto was about to intervene, to end it in a single, silent motion, when another energy signature flared to life nearby. It was the same type of dark power, but controlled, focused. A crimson magic circle, intricate and glowing, erupted in the space between the monster and its victim. From it, a blast of pure destructive energy, a wave of crimson and black, slammed into the stray devil. The monster shrieked as it was thrown back, its shoulder smoldering where the blast had hit. The woman on the ground whimpered as several figures stepped out of the shadows, positioning themselves defensively in front of her. Naruto, perched invisibly on a high tree branch, watched with a critical eye. The leader was immediately obvious. A young woman with a cascade of fiery crimson hair that seemed to absorb the moonlight. She carried herself with an air of noble authority. Her blue-green eyes narrowed in focused anger. She wore the Kuo Academy uniform, as did the others. This was the clan from the school. Beside her was a young woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail, a serene, almost cheerful smile on her face that didn't quite match the dangerous glint in her eyes. A crackle of yellow lightning danced around her fingertips. In front of them stood a handsome blonde man holding a European-style sword, his stance that of a seasoned fencer. To his other side was a small girl with white hair and a stoic expression, her hands clenched into fists that seemed to radiate physical power. And slightly behind them all was a brown-haired boy who looked utterly out of his depth, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Kiba, Kaneko, engage. The crimson-haired leader commanded, her voice crisp and clear. Akano, provide support. Issei, stay back and protect the civilian. The team moved with practiced efficiency. The blonde, Kiba, blurred forward. His speed impressive. He was a whisper of movement, his sword a silver streak aimed at the stray's neck. Simultaneously, the small girl, Kaneko, shot forward like a cannonball. Her fist cocked back for a devastating blow to the monster's midsection. The stray, however, was a creature of pure instinct. It screeched, its multiple red eyes tracking both attackers at once. It ducked under Kiba's slash with unnatural flexibility and swatted him away with a backhand, sending the swordsman tumbling. At the same time, it brought a knee up to intercept Kaniko's punch. The impact created a shockwave that cracked the ground, but the stray only grunted, its powerful leg holding firm against the small girl's immense strength. From the rear, the girl named Akino giggled softly. Era, he's a feisty one. She raised her hand, and a bolt of holy lightning, a jarring mix of light and dark energy, lanced through the air, striking the stray in the back. It roared in pain, its body convulsing as the holy energy seared its demonic flesh. The attack, while effective, also enraged it. It ignored Kiba and Kaniko, its attention now fixed on Akino. With a horrifying screech, it bounded towards her. Its claws extended. Naruto watched the battle unfold with a dispassionate, analytical gaze. The team was good. They had power, skill, and teamwork. But they were also inefficient. Their attacks were powerful but lacked the definitive, killing precision needed to end a fight quickly. They were trying to contain the monster and minimize collateral damage, which was commendable. But their approach was creating a larger opening for error. The stray was unpredictable, and the longer the fight dragged on, the higher the chance that the injured civilian or one of the team members would get hurt. The brown-haired boy, Issei, was fumbling to create a protective barrier around the woman, but his fear was palpable. He was a weak link. The stray was almost upon Akino. Kiba was too far away to intercept, and Kaniko was a step too slow. The crimson-haired leader, Rias, was gathering another blast of her power of destruction, but it wouldn't be ready in time. They're going to lose one, Kurama noted. His tone flat. No, they're not, Naruto replied. He dropped from the tree branch. He didn't fall. He simply ceased to be on the branch and appeared on the ground, a silent step that didn't even disturb the air. For a split second, no one noticed him. All eyes were on the monster about to rip Akino apart. Naruto took one calm step forward, entering the frantic choreography of the battle like a phantom. To the devils, whose senses were attuned to demonic energy, he might as well have been invisible. He had no scent of the underworld, no aura of holy light. He was a void in their perception. He flowed past Akino, who was bracing for the impact, her eyes wide. He moved past the charging monster, his shoulder almost brushing its grotesque hide. He was so fast, so silent, that he seemed to be moving in a different stream of time. He raised one hand, his fingers extended in a simple, precise knife hand strike. He channeled a minuscule, perfectly controlled burst of chakra into his fingertips. Just enough to turn them into something harder than diamond. He didn't aim for the head or the chest. He aimed for a specific nerve cluster at the base of the creature's skull. A point he had identified in the first 2 seconds of observing its physiology. His hand struck. There was no sound, no explosion of power, just a soft thump, like a finger tapping on a melon. The stray devil froze mid-lunge. Its claws were inches from Akino's face. Its snarling jaw was locked open. All 6 of its red eyes went dim, the light within them extinguishing like snuffed candles. Its momentum carried it forward for another foot, and then it simply collapsed, folding in on itself like a puppet with its strings cut. It hit the ground in a heap, completely and utterly still. DxD before it even knew it was under attack. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the soft splash of the fountain and the injured woman's ragged breathing. The entire Grimoire peerage stared, utterly dumbfounded. One moment, Akino was about to be killed. The next, a stranger in a black and orange jacket was standing over the corpse of their enemy, which he had dispatched with a single, silent, incomprehensible touch. Naruto slowly lowered his hand, flexing his fingers. He gave the dead stray a cursory glance, then turned his attention to the stunned devils. His blue eyes, calm and assessing, met the wide, shocked blue-green eyes of their leader. "You're sloppy," he said, his voice even and devoid of judgment. It was a simple statement of fact. You let the fight drag on. You were more concerned with showing off than finishing it. That's how people get killed. Rias Grimoire, heiress to one of the underworld's most powerful families, the king of this peerage and the absolute ruler of this territory, was speechless. She stared at the blonde man. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build. But it was his presence that was so jarring. He radiated an aura of calm confidence that was almost suffocating. It wasn't arrogance. It was the deep, unshakable certainty of someone who had faced true gods and emerged victorious. And his energy, she couldn't feel anything. It was like looking at a human. But her demonic senses were screaming that he was anything but. Who are you? She finally managed, finding her voice. Kiba and Kaneko had regrouped, moving to stand protectively in front of her. Kiba's sword was pointed at Naruto, though his hand trembled slightly. Kaneko's small fists were clenched, her golden eyes narrowed in suspicion. Just a guy out for a walk, Naruto replied casually, his gaze sweeping over them. He noted their uniforms. You kids should be in bed. It's a school night. Akano, having recovered from her near-death experience, let out a soft, breathy laugh. She stepped forward, her usual seductive smile back in place, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. My, a handsome stranger comes to rescue a damsel in distress. How wonderfully heroic. Perhaps you'd like to come back with us for some tea as a thank you. Her voice was laced with a subtle charm, a devilish enchantment meant to lower his guard. Naruto met her violet eyes, and his own gaze was so clear and direct that her smile faltered for a second. The charm washed over him and dissipated like mist in the sun. Thanks for the offer, but I'm not thirsty, he said, his tone polite but dismissive. He then nodded towards the injured woman, who was now being helped by the brown-haired boy, Issei. You should probably get her to a hospital. And find a better story than, a monster attacked us in the park. He turned to leave. Stop. Rias's voice rang out, filled with authority. You're not going anywhere. You reek of the dimensional gap. You're one of Ophis's associates, aren't you? A member of the Chaos Brigade. Naruto paused, turning back to face her. He raised an eyebrow. The name, Ophis, had gotten her attention, just as he knew it would. He could feel a faint Ace of the Gap's unique energy clinging to his clothes. He hadn't bothered to mask it. You've got a good nose, he complimented her. I know Ophis, but I don't know anything about a Chaos Brigade. Lies. Rias snapped, her crimson aura flaring around her. The Chaos Brigade is a terrorist organization led by the Ouroboros dragon, Ophis. They seek to disrupt the balance between the three factions. Don't play dumb with me. You're an enemy. Naruto sighed. Politics. He should have known. He had hoped for a simple, quiet life helping a lonely dragon, and on his very first night, he'd stumbled into a faction war. Look, Red, he said, his tone losing its easygoing edge and becoming firm. I'm not your enemy. I have my own reasons for being here, and they have nothing to do with your little squabbles. I just took care of your mess for you. Thank you, would be nice. But either way, I'm leaving. I don't think so, Kiba said, taking a step forward. President, give the order. Rias hesitated for a fraction of a second. This man was an unknown. He had dispatched a stray devil that was giving her peerage trouble with an ease that was terrifying. Engaging him was foolish, but letting a potential high-ranking member of the Chaos Brigade walk away freely in her territory was unacceptable. Subdue him, she ordered, her voice cold. Don't kill him. I want answers. Kiba didn't need to be told twice. He activated his sacred gear. Sword birth. The ground around him erupted with swords of every shape and size, creating a deadly steel garden. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a demonic blade into his hand and vanished. He moved with a speed that would be invisible to any human eye, appearing directly behind Naruto, his sword aimed for a disabling cut across the back of his legs. To Naruto, Kiba's movements were laughably slow. He had tracked the fourth Raikage at his maximum speed. He had fought alongside his father, the Yellow Flash. This was like watching a child run in slow motion. Without even turning his head, Naruto took a single step to the side. Kiba's blade sliced through empty air. The blonde swordsman's eyes widened in shock at the effortless dodge. He immediately pivoted, transitioning into a flurry of blindingly fast strikes, each one aimed with perfect precision. Naruto didn't draw a weapon. He didn't even look at his opponent. He simply walked. With each swing of Kiba's sword, Naruto made a minuscule adjustment, a slight turn of his shoulder, a small tilt of his head, a half step forward. The deadly barrage of steel passed harmlessly around him, never coming closer than an inch from his body. It looked less like a fight and more like a dance, with Kiba as the frantic, frustrated partner and Naruto as the impossibly graceful lead. He's getting angry, Kurama observed with amusement. His pride is wounded. Kiba gritted his teeth, pouring more and more demonic energy into his legs, pushing his speed to its absolute limit. He became a blur of silver light, his sword a web of deadly arcs. Naruto finally stopped walking. He raised his left hand, his movements casual, as Kiba's blade descended in a powerful overhead slash aimed to cleave him in two. Naruto caught the sword between his index and middle fingers. The sound of metal striking flesh never came. The blade stopped dead, an inch from Naruto's forehead. The shock of the ABRUP. T-halt traveled up the sword and into Kiba's arm, making his bones rattle. He stared, his face a perfect picture of disbelief. The man had stopped his full-powered strike, a blow meant to cut through steel, with 2 fingers. "You're fast," Naruto said, his voice calm, his blue eyes finally looking directly at Kiba. "But you rely on it too much. Your movements are predictable." Before Kiba could react, Naruto flicked his fingers. The demonic sword, an extension of Kiba's own power, shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. While Kiba was still reeling, a shadow fell over Naruto. Kaneko had launched herself into the air, her small body radiating an immense amount of physical power. She descended like a meteor, her fist aimed directly at the top of his head. Ha! Naruto didn't move, he simply looked up as she fell. He braced his legs slightly, channeling a thin layer of sage chakra over his skin. Kaneko's fist connected with his shoulder. The result was not what anyone expected. There was no crater. Naruto didn't fly into the ground. He didn't even flinch. There was just a dull, solid thud. The force of Kaneko's punch, a blow that could shatter a boulder into dust, seemed to just disappear. It was absorbed into his body, vanishing without a trace. Kaneko's eyes went wide with shock. It was like punching a mountain that punched back. The kinetic energy had nowhere to go, and it rebounded up her own arm, making her cry out in pain and surprise. She staggered back, cradling her hand, her stoic expression finally broken by disbelief. "And you're strong," Naruto said, looking at her with a hint of sympathy. "But you put all your energy into one spot. It's easy to counter if you know it's coming." He rolled his shoulder, which hadn't moved an inch from the impact. The clearing fell silent once more. Rias, Akeno, and Issei stared in absolute horror. In less than 30 seconds, he had effortlessly neutralized their knight and their rook, their fastest and their strongest members, without even seeming to try. This wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration. Naruto let out a weary sigh. "Are we done here, or does anyone else want to try?" He looked directly at Rias, his message clear. "This is your last chance to walk away." Rias's mind was spinning. The power this man had just displayed was monstrous. It was on par with a high-class devil, maybe even an ultimate class. Searsex. He was on her brother's level. The thought was terrifying. No mere agent of the Chaos Brigade should be this powerful. Who was he? She had no more cards to play. She had seen enough. This was a being they could not afford to make an enemy of. Swallowing her pride, she raised a hand. "Stand down." Kiba and Kaneko, both shaken and humbled, reluctantly obeyed. Naruto nodded. "Good choice." He finally turned to leave for good. "Like I said, I'm not your enemy. I'm not interested in your factions or your politics. My business is with Ophis and Ophis alone. So do me a favor." He glanced back over his shoulder, his blue eyes holding an intensity that made them all flinch. "Stay out of my way." With that, he took a step and simply vanished, leaving no trace he had ever been there. The Grimoire Peerage stood in stunned silence for a long time, the only sounds being the fountain and the dead stray devil at their feet. "Rias, what was that?" Issei finally stammered, his face pale. Rias didn't answer. She was staring at the spot where the man had disappeared, her mind racing. An unknown player of immeasurable power had just appeared in her territory, allied with the leader of the Chaos Brigade. He was calm, decisive, and so far beyond her peerage that it was laughable. This was a crisis on a scale she had never imagined. "Akeno," she said, her voice tight. "Clean this up. Erase the memories of the civilians. Kiba, Kaneko, you're with me. We're going back to the clubroom. Now." She had to report this. She had to report this to her brother, Searsex Lucifer, immediately. The game had just changed. Miles away, in the bell tower of an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of Kuo, a figure knelt in silent prayer. He was dressed in the simple white and gold robes of an exorcist. But his presence was anything but simple. This was Sariel, a watcher of the Celestial Wardens, a low-ranking member of Metatron's Divine Task Force. In front of him, a font of holy water shimmered, the surface acting as a perfect mirror, replaying the events in the park. He had been dispatched to observe the anomaly the foreign signature Metatron had detected. He had found it, a being masquerading as a human male. And he had watched, his analytical mind recording every detail. He watched the being obliterate the stray devil with a single, precise strike. He analyzed the energy. It was not holy, nor was it demonic. It was vitalistic, a pure life force, concentrated and weaponized in a way he had never seen. He named it Chakra, in his report, a placeholder for this new, unknown power source. He watched the being effortlessly humiliate the Grimoire Peerage's knight and rook. He noted the impossible speed, the supernatural reflexes, the invulnerability to physical force. The anomaly was not just powerful. It was skilled. It possessed a level of combat experience that spoke of countless life or death battles. Sariel's lips moved in a silent, telepathic whisper, his report transmitted directly to his Lord Metatron in the highest heavens. Anomaly designated, Naruto Uzumaki, has been located and observed. Subject displays power levels far exceeding initial projections. Threat classification. Alpha. Nature of power is a foreign vitalistic energy, highly adaptable and controlled. Subject is confirmed to be in league with the Ouroboros dragon, but claims no allegiance to the Chaos Brigade. His motives are unknown. His combat prowess is absolute. He paused, replaying the moment Naruto had caught Kiba's sword. He is a warrior of the highest caliber. His presence DxD lizes the local balance of power significantly. Recommend escalating classification. Direct contact may be necessary to ascertain his true purpose and potential threat to celestial order. Sariel Fini shed his report and the image in the holy water faded. He stood, his face calm and resolute. The will of heaven was absolute. This foreign contagion, this, Naruto Uzumaki, had introduced a chaotic VA. Riable into a carefully balanced equation. And it was the sacred duty of the Celestial Wardens to eliminate such variables. One way or another. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Unheroic Hero. Naruto returned to the silent estate just as the first hint of dawn was touching the horizon. He entered quietly, the grand foyer bathed in the soft gray light of early morning. He found Ophis exactly where he'd left her, sitting on the oversized black couch, her posture unchanged. She didn't appear to have moved a single inch in the hours he'd been gone. Her gray eyes opened as he approached, tracking him with that unnerving, placid intensity. "Your walk was loud," she observed, her voice echoing in his mind. Naruto sank onto the opposite couch, letting his head fall back against the cool leather with a sigh. "You wouldn't believe the welcoming committee. A bunch of high school devils who accused me of being a terrorist. Apparently, you're the infamous leader of something called the Chaos Brigade." He cracked an eye open to look at her. "Anything you want to tell me?" "The Chaos Brigade is a faction I created," she stated, with no more emotion than if she were describing the weather. "Descendants of the old Mao, monsters, rogue gods. They are noisy. They wish to fight. I let them use my name. Their chaos is a useful distraction. It keeps the other factions focused on them, and not on me. Oh, you're a figurehead for a bunch of malcontents because it keeps people off your back," Naruto summarized. Sounds surprisingly practical. It also sounded lonely. Creating an army so you could be left alone was a new level of solitude. "Well, your fan club is a little aggressive. I had to spank their two strongest fighters. I don't think they liked it. They are the Grimoire and Citri clans," Ophis supplied. "The younger sisters of two of the current Satans who rule the underworld. Their presence here is to maintain the truce in this town. You have disrupted their balance. They started it," Naruto said simply, closing his eye again. "Anyway, it's handled for now. They know to stay away." He fell silent for a moment, the quiet of the house seeping into his bones. It was a nice change from the constant thrum of Konoha. "You know," he said, his voice softer, "I promised you ramen. I think I'll track down the ingredients today. Even in another dimension, a promise is a promise. A faint, almost imperceptible curiosity flickered in Ophis's gaze. This ramen, you believe it can truly change a life? Naruto grinned without opening his eyes. Ophis, it can change the world. Our quiet morning was interrupted by a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't a sound or a visible phenomenon. It was a feeling, a dissonant chord struck on the strings of reality. Naruto sat up instantly, his senses on high alert. Ophis tilted her head, her expression unchanging, but her focus was clearly directed outward. More noise, she stated. Different from the devils, harsher, more arrogant. Naruto stood and walked to one of the large windows, peering out at the rising sun. He extended his senses, pushing them past the town's limits, searching for the source of the disturbance Ophis had felt. He found it miles away, in a range of wooded hills to the north. It was a cluster of powerful signatures, all distinctly human, yet each one thrumming with an energy that felt ancient and immense. It was the energy of legends, concentrated into living vessels, sacred gears, Kurama identified, his mental voice sharp with interest. Like the brown-haired boy from the park, but 100 times more potent. These aren't children playing at war. What is it? Naruto asked Ophis. The hero faction, she answered. Humans who wield powerful sacred gears. They believe humanity should rule the world, free from the influence of gods, devils, and dragons. Their leader, Cao, is the current wielder of the true Longinus, the spear that is said to have pierced the side of the Christian god. They are exceptionally loud. Humans fighting for humanity. On the surface, it was a noble cause, one he could almost respect. But he could feel the energy they projected. It wasn't noble, it was laced with a chilling undercurrent of zealotry, a self-righteous conviction that bordered on fanaticism. What are they doing out there? He wondered aloud. There is an abandoned research facility in those hills, Ophis supplied. It belonged to the church. They experimented on their own exorcists, trying to create artificial sacred gears. The project was a failure. The test subjects were deemed heretical and were sealed away, left to rot. The hero faction is likely attempting to recruit them, to acquire assets. Naruto's expression hardened. Recruiting desperate, tortured soldiers for a holy war. Abandoning your own people when an experiment fails. He didn't care what faction they belonged to. That was the kind of thing that set his teeth on edge. I'm going to go have a look, he said, his voice low. You attract trouble, Ophis noted. Trouble finds me, Naruto corrected, a grim smile on his face. It's one of my talents. He didn't bother with the door. He simply flickered out of existence, his body dissolving into a yellow flash, leaving behind a perfectly calm, silent house and a single, pensive dragon god. The abandoned Vatican outpost was a brutalist scar of concrete and rusted steel half buried in the side of a remote hill. Barbed wire fences, long since collapsed, lay in tangled heaps around the perimeter. The entire facility radiated a faint, lingering aura of pain and despair. Inside the main research chamber, a dozen men and women in tattered exorcist robes stood huddled together, their faces a mixture of fear, confusion, and a dawning, desperate hope. They were the survivors, the failed experiments, forgotten by their god and their church. Before them stood a young man with a confident, easygoing smile. He was handsome, dressed in a simple white and purple Chinese-style tunic. He leaned casually on the shaft of a magnificent golden spear that pulsed with an almost unbearable holy aura. This was Cao, leader of the hero faction. For years, you have been locked away in this tomb, he said, his voice resonating with charisma and conviction. Cast aside by the very institution you swore your lives to. Why? Because you sought the power to protect humanity, and they feared it. They feared you. He paced before them, his movements fluid and assured. His team stood behind him, a formidable lineup of living legends. A massive, muscular man with the strength of a demigod, Heracles. A stoic man in silver armor, a half-dozen demonic swords strapped to his back, Siegfried. A beautiful young woman with blonde hair, her hand resting on the hilt of a holy sword, Jean. And a young man holding a grimoire, his eyes alight with magical power, Georg. The angels in heaven preach of love but demand blind obedience, Cao continued, his voice rising with passion. The devils in the underworld whisper of freedom but offer only servitude. They are not our shepherds. They are our jailers. They treat humanity as a resource, a playground, a flock of sheep to be managed. But I say, no more. Humanity is not weak. In our veins runs the blood of heroes. In our hands, we hold the power to shape our own destiny. He raised his spear, the true Longinus, and its golden light filled the chamber, washing over the broken exorcists. It was a light of hope, of power, of revolution. Join me, he declared, his smile unwavering. Join the hero faction. Together, we will tear down the thrones of heaven and the underworld. We will forge a world where humans are the masters of their own fate. A world for humanity. A murmur of excitement and agreement rippled through the exorcists. Their fear was being burned away by the fire of his words, replaced by righteous anger and a renewed sense of purpose. They were ready to pledge their lives to his cause. It was at the peak of this crescendo that a new voice, calm and unimpressed, cut through the charged atmosphere. That's a real nice speech. You get a lot of people with that one. Every head in the room snapped towards the source of the voice. Leaning against the far wall, his arms crossed casually over his chest, was a blond man in a ridiculous black and orange jacket. He hadn't been there a second ago. There had been no sound. No flash of light, no ripple of magic. He had simply appeared. Cao Cao's smile tightened, but it didn't vanish. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed as he assessed the newcomer. He couldn't sense any demonic or holy power from him. He was, for all intents and purposes, human. But the sheer, unshakable confidence radiating from him was anything but normal. And you are? Cao Cao asked, his tone pleasant, though his grip on his spear tightened. Just a guy who doesn't like it when people prey on the desperate, Naruto replied, pushing himself off the wall and taking a slow step forward. You talk a big game about humanity, but you're just like them. The gods, the devils. You see these people as assets. Tools for your little war. Cao Cao chuckled, a genuinely amused sound. You misunderstand. I am liberating them. I am giving them a cause worth fighting for. A human cause. He gestured with his free hand. You're human, aren't you? And a powerful one, at that. To have gotten in here so quietly. This is your fight, too. Join us. A man of your talents could rise high in our new world. Naruto stopped in the center of the room, midway between the hero faction and the exorcists. He looked at Cao Cao, and his blue eyes were as clear and deep as the sky. You're wrong, he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the chamber. You don't fight for humanity. You fight for your own pride. You think because you hold a powerful weapon, you have the right to decide the fate of the world. You've mistaken power for wisdom. The last vestiges of Cao Cao's smile vanished. The air in the room grew heavy, crackling with tension. So you're an enemy, then, Cao Cao said, his voice turning cold. A fool who sides with the monsters against his own kind. A pity. He gave a subtle nod to his comrades. Kill him. The first to move was Heracles. With a roar that shook the concrete walls, the mountain of a man charged, his fists glowing with a colossal amount of physical energy. He was pure, overwhelming force, a living battering ram meant to pulverize anything in his path. Naruto didn't move. He watched the demigod-like warrior close the distance, his expression calm. At the last possible second, as the massive, glowing fist was about to connect with his face, he ducked under the blow. The punch missed, slamming into the wall behind him and blasting a hole straight through 5 feet of reinforced concrete to the dirt beyond. While still in a crouch, Naruto spun on his heel. His legs swept out in a low arc, not with brute force, but with perfect timing and leverage. Striking Heracles behind the knees. The giant, for all his power, had his balance completely compromised. He stumbled, his immense forward momentum now working against him. Naruto straightened up and placed a single, open palm on Heracles' back as the giant fell forward. A small, perfect sphere of swirling blue energy, no bigger than a marble, materialized in his hand. Rasengan. He didn't shove it into Heracles. He just touched him with it. The effect was instantaneous. The spiraling chakra drilled into the giant's body, not as a destructive explosion, but as a focused vortex of kinetic force. Heracles' eyes bulged. He was launched forward like a stone from a catapult, flying across the entire chamber and slamming into the far wall with a sickening crunch. He slid to the floor, unconscious, his aura sputtering out. It had taken less than 3 seconds. Before anyone could process the fall of their powerhouse, Siegfried was on him. The Dragon Slayer was a whirlwind of steel. 3 demonic swords dancing in the air around him as he wielded a fourth, each blade weaving a complex, inescapable pattern of attack. Descendant of the original Siegfried, E.H. Kurama noted with a mental snort. Let's see if he's anything more than a name. Naruto met the assault with what looked like effortless grace. He flowed backward, his hands a blur as he parried, deflected, and redirected the storm of blades. He didn't use a weapon. He used the back of his hand, his forearms, even the sole of his shoe, each movement precisely calculated to intercept a blade and turn its momentum aside. Sparks flew as demonic steel scraped against skin protected by a thin, invisible layer of sage chakra. You're just a cheap copy of a guy with too many swords I used to know, Naruto grunted, finally catching the blade of Siegfried's main sword in his bare hand. The metal screeched, but couldn't cut him. And he was better at it. With a twist of his wrist, he disarmed Siegfried, sending the demonic sword spinning into the ceiling. He then spun inside the Dragonslayer's guard and delivered a sharp, precise chop to the side of his neck. Siegfried's eyes rolled back in his head, and he crumpled to the floor. 2 down. Jean. Georg. Now. Cao Cao commanded, his face now a mask of cold fury. Jean drew her holy sword, blade blacksmith, and it flared with holy light. At the same time, Georg's grimoire flipped open, and a complex magic circle expanded on the floor around Naruto. Dimension lost. A perfect, gray fog erupted from the circle, a mist that was a world in itself, designed to completely sever the senses and trap anyone within it. Simultaneously, Jean lunged forward, stabbing her holy sword directly into the heart of the fog, aiming for where Naruto stood. But she stabbed nothing. From above them, Naruto's voice called down, calm and clear. Up here. They all looked up. He was standing on the ceiling, held there by a simple application of chakra, looking down on them as if they were pieces on a game board. He hadn't been trapped by the fog, he had simply leapt out of it before it could even form completely. Clever trick, he said. He then dropped from the ceiling, not toward Jean or Georg, but toward the group of terrified exorcists. He landed softly in front of them, creating a human shield. But you're getting your own people caught in the crossfire. Not very heroic. Cao Cao's eyes blazed. They are acceptable sacrifices for the sake of our ideal. See, Naruto said, not even looking at the exorcists behind him. They could feel the sheer protective power radiating from him. That's what I'm talking about. You're no different from a monster. He raised a hand, and 3 black, baseball-sized spheres materialized behind him, humming with an energy that seemed to negate reality itself. The truth-seeking orbs. My turn, he said. He flickered. One moment he was in front of the exorcists, the next he was directly in front of Georg. The mage's eyes widened in panic, but he had no time to cast another spell. Naruto tapped him on the forehead with 2 fingers. A surge of chakra disrupted Georg's concentration, and he slumped to the ground, unconscious. Jean cried out and swung her holy sword in a wide, desperate arc. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply allowed one of his truth-seeking orbs to float into the blade's path. When the holy sword made contact with the black sphere, it didn't clash. It just stopped. The holy aura around the blade was extinguished, its divine properties utterly nullified. Anne stared in horror as her ultimate weapon was rendered as useless as a stick of wood. Naruto gently took it from her nerveless grasp and tapped her on the shoulder, sending her to join her comrades on the floor. In less than a minute, the entire elite team of the hero faction had been dismantled, defeated without a single drop of blood being shed. The chamber was silent, save for the sound of Cao Cao's ragged breathing. He stood alone, facing Naruto, his knuckles white where he gripped the true Longinus. The rescued exorcist stared in mute, terrified awe at the blonde man who had just defeated living legends as if they were children. Impossible, Cao Cao whispered, his charismatic facade completely shattered, replaced by raw disbelief. Who? What are you? I'm the guy who's going to teach you a lesson about what it really means to be a hero, Naruto said, his voice deadly serious. With a scream of pure rage and humiliation, Cao Cao lunged, thrusting the spear of destiny forward. The tip of the golden spear blazed with a light so intense it seemed to burn a hole in reality itself. It was an attack that warped space, a holy judgment that could erase gods from existence. Naruto didn't try to block it. He didn't try to counter it. He sidestepped it. He moved with a burst of speed that made his previous movements look sluggish. He was a streak of orange and gold, flowing around the spear's deadly trajectory. He moved inside Cao Cao's reach, his hand lancing out not to strike, but to grab. He caught the shaft of the true Longinus just behind the spearhead. The holy power of the spear washed over him. A torrent of divine energy designed to purify and destroy anything unholy. But Naruto wasn't unholy, or demonic. He was something else entirely. The six-path sage energy that coated his body met the divine power. Not with resistance, but with a kind of serene dominance. The spear's raging light calmed, its immense power soothed into submission by a force that was in harmony with all things. Cao Cao's eyes were wide with terror. His ultimate weapon, the bane of gods, had been caught and pacified by this man's bare hand. Naruto wrenched the spear from Cao Cao's grasp and spun, using the weapon's own momentum to slam the blunt end of its shaft into Cao Cao's stomach. The hero gasped, the wind knocked out of him, and collapsed to his knees, clutching his gut. Naruto reversed the spear and rested its point gently on Cao Cao's shoulder. The fight was over. True strength isn't about the power you hold to stand above others, Naruto said, his voice low and firm as he looked down at the defeated leader. It's about the power you use to lift them up. You could have been a true hero. You could have united people, protected them. But you chose this path. The path of arrogance and sacrifice. Remember this defeat, and think about what kind of hero you really want to be. He tossed the true Longinus aside. It clattered to the floor, its divine light dimmed. He turned his back on the broken hero faction and walked towards the stunned group of exorcists. You're all free, he said, his voice kind now. Go, find a new life. Don't let yourselves be used as tools by anyone ever again. He placed a hand on the wall, and with a surge of chakra, blew a massive, clean hole in the side of the facility, creating a new exit that led out into the bright morning sun. One by one, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction, the exorcists walked through it, out into the light. Hidden in the woods a quarter of a mile away, kneeling behind a veil of holy camouflage, the watcher Sariel finally stood up. His heart, a celestial instrument that had beat with the same calm rhythm for centuries, was hammering against his ribs. He had recorded everything. The nullification of Heracles' raw power. The utter domination of Siegfried's legendary swordsmanship. The negation of dimension lost in Blade Blacksmith. And, most terrifyingly, the pacification of the true Longinus. His mind reeled. This Naruto Uzumaki wasn't just a powerful fighter. His abilities defied the fundamental laws of this reality. He wielded an energy that acted as a universal counter to demonic, magical, and even the highest orders of holy power. He was not just a foreign variable, he was a walking paradox, a being who rendered their established systems of power meaningless. Sariel's hands trembled as he sent his final, urgent report. Lord Metatron, my assessment was flawed. Category Alpha is insufficient. The subject, Naruto Uzumaki, has engaged and neutralized the entire leadership of the hero faction, including the wielder of the true Longinus. He did so without sustaining injury, and without killing a single opponent. His power is not merely combative, it is conceptual. It rewrites the rules of engagement. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the image of Naruto catching the holy spear burned into his memory. He is not a simple foreign threat. He is a philosophical contagion. His ideology, sparing enemies, protecting the weak regardless of faction, challenging the very definition of strength, is as dangerous as his power. He is a catalyst for unpredictable change on a global scale. Immediate, direct intervention is required. I repeat, Lord Metatron, we must act now. He cannot be allowed to operate unchecked. In his celestial realm of perfect, unwavering light, Metatron received the report. The golden script flared before his serene face. For the first time in an age, the voice of God felt a flicker of something akin to concern. This anomaly was evolving, adapting. and influencing its new environment at a rate that was alarming. Subtlety had failed. Observation was no longer sufficient. With a thought, he issued a new directive. It flowed down through the heavenly choirs. A command of absolute authority. A virtue class warden, a specialist in direct contact and threat neutralization, was to be dispatched. Its mission: to apprehend the anomaly, Naruto Uzumaki, and bring him to the celestial realm for judgment. By force, if necessary. The order of the universe had to be preserved. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. An Invitation of Kings. The supernatural world. D operated on a currency of power and information, and news of the hero faction's utter humiliation spread faster than wildfire. It wasn't a rumor. It was a seismic event, a broadcast of raw data and panicked energy signatures that every major power felt simultaneously. In the opulent office of the Mao Lucifer, located in the crimson-hued capital of Lilith, Sears X Lucifer leaned over his desk. His handsome face a mask of deep concentration. Before him, a projection from a communications magic circle showed the worried face of Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels. Azazel, usual, why the picture of laid-back intellectual curiosity, looked genuinely rattled. Utterly dismantled, Sears X, Azazel was saying, running a hand through his black hair. Heracles, Siegfried, Jean, the whole crew. Not killed, but neutralized with an efficiency I've never seen. Our spies on the scene said it was one man. And get this. Cao Cao's true Longinus was taken from him and used to beat him into submission. The Holy Spear. Just. Taken. Sears X's crimson eyes narrowed. One man, Azazel confirmed. Blonde hair, orange and black clothes. Fought without a sacred gear, without any recognizable magic. Just raw physical ability and some kind of strange, vital energy. Does that description sound familiar? It did. Not 10 minutes ago, Sears X had received an urgent, frantic report from his younger sister, Rias. She had described an identical man who had appeared in her territory, effortlessly dispatching a stray and then, with almost insulting ease, disabling her knight and rook. A man who claimed to be an associate of Ophis. The two reports, laid side by side, painted a terrifying picture. An unknown entity of immeasurable power was now active. He was allied with the infinite dragon god, the symbolic leader of the world's most dangerous terrorist organization. And he had just single-handedly crushed another of the world's major powers in a casual morning workout. This wasn't a political issue. This was a potential extinction-level event walking around in a tracksuit. It does, Sears X said, his voice dangerously calm. He's in Kuo town. My sister encountered him last night. Azazel whistled, a low, impressed sound. So he's setting up shop in your sister's territory. Bold. What's the plan, Lucifer? We can't just let a being like this wander around unchecked. If he truly joins Ophis's cause, the Chaos Brigade goes from a collection of nuisances to the single greatest threat we've ever faced. The Great War would look like a schoolyard scuffle. Sears X leaned back in his chair, tapping a single finger on his polished mahogany desk. His mind, one of the most brilliant strategic instruments in the underworld, was working at lightning speed. A direct assault was out of the question. Sending an army against a man who could neutralize the true Longinus was like throwing pebbles at a hurricane. Subterfuge. Unlikely. A being of that caliber would sense any trap miles away. That left one option. The one devils were best at, but also the riskiest. Politics. We don't attack, Sears X said, his decision made. We talk. We bring him to us, on our turf, but as a guest. We need to know who he is, where he comes from, and what he wants. We need to know if his allegiance to Ophis is absolute, or if it can be negotiated. You want to invite him for tea? Azazel asked, incredulous. After he just wiped the floor with Cao Cao. Precisely because he just wiped the floor with Cao Cao, Sears X corrected. He did so without killing anyone. That LLS me he isn't driven by mindless destruction. He's a rational actor, and rational actors can be reasoned with. He paused, his crimson eyes gleaming with regal authority. Prepare for a summit, Azazel. I'll contact Michael. We will present a united front. And I will send my most trusted messenger to extend the invitation personally. An offer he cannot mistake for a threat. Azazel mulled it over for a second. Then a slow grin spread across his face. A royal summons. I like it. A high-stakes game of poker with a new player who might be holding all the cards. This is more exciting than any of my research projects. The connection cut, leaving Sirzek alone in the silent office. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling, crimson-lit city of Lilith. He had forged a fragile peace in the wake of a devastating civil war. He would not allow it to be shattered by an unknown variable. He raised his hand, and a silver magic circle glowed before him. Graphia, he said, his voice soft but firm. Come to my office. I have a mission for you. A diplomatic mission of the highest importance. So, you just add hot water, Naruto explained, holding up a small, colorful, plastic-wrapped brick of dried noodles. Then you wait 3 minutes. 3, not 2, not 4. It's a science. And then, bam, a meal fit for a king. Or, in your case, a dragon god. He and Ophis were in the kitchen of the estate. It was a vast, sterile expanse of stainless steel and white marble that had clearly never been used. Naruto had just returned from a quick, unobserved trip to a human supermarket, and had arrayed his findings on the pristine countertop. A dozen different brands of instant ramen, a bag of oranges, and a carton of milk he'd bought mostly out of habit. Ophis stared at the ramen package in his hand. Her head tilted. This brick contains life-changing power. Guaranteed, Naruto said with a grin. Or your money back. You're trying to explain the culinary arts to a being who probably sustains herself on cosmic dust, Kurama commented dryly. This is a new low, even for you. Hey, everyone loves ramen, Naruto shot back. It's a universal constant. Before Ophis could respond to his claim, the air in the room grew heavy and cold. The temperature dropped by 20 degrees in a second. A silver magic circle, impossibly intricate and radiating an aura of immense, chilling power, bloomed on the floor in the center of the kitchen. Naruto was instantly in front of Ophis, his body a shield, his easygoing demeanor gone, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a cage. From the circle emerged a woman. She was beautiful, with long silver hair braided down her back, and wore the crisp, elegant uniform of a head maid. Her red eyes were cold and analytical, and her entire being radiated a pressure that could make lesser beings fall to their knees. This was Graphia Lucifuge, the silver-haired queen of annihilation, wife of Sirzek's Lucifer, and arguably the most powerful queen in the underworld. She took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. The strange man in orange and black, his posture relaxed but radiating a terrifying level of readiness. The infinite dragon god, Ophis, sitting at the kitchen island, looking at her with blank, gray eyes. And the baffling assortment of cheap human food on the counter. Greetings, Graphia said, her voice as crisp and cold as a winter morning. Her gaze was fixed on Naruto. I am Graphia Lucifuge. I come on behalf of my master, Sirzek's Lucifer. Naruto relaxed his stance slightly, though his senses were still on high alert. This woman was powerful, on a completely different level from Rias's peerage. He could feel it, a coiled serpent of destructive ice magic held in perfect, disciplined check. Lucifer, Naruto repeated, nodding. The big boss, right. Rias's older brother. Lord Sirzek is one of the 4 great Satans who rule the underworld, Graphia corrected, her tone leaving no room for argument. Right, Satans. Got it. Naruto gestured casually toward a chair. Want a seat? I was just about to make some lunch. Can I offer you some instant ramen? It'll change your life. Graphia's perfect, stoic expression faltered for a barest fraction of a second. She had expected fear, hostility, arrogance. She had not expected an offer of cheap noodles. This man was either insane or so confident in his power that the arrival of one of the underworld's strongest beings in his kitchen was a minor inconvenience. I am not here for lunch, she said, regaining her composure. I am here to deliver an invitation. Lord Sirzek, along with the leaders of the Gregorian heaven, formally request your presence at a summit to be held in the underworld. They wish to open a dialogue. So, the invitation had come. Naruto had expected it. After the events of the last 12 hours, the factions would be in a panic. A meeting was the logical next step. A dialogue, Naruto said, crossing his arms. That's a nice word for it. Sounds more like an interrogation. It is an opportunity for all parties to state their intentions and avoid unnecessary conflict, Graphia replied, her diplomatic mask firmly in place. Naruto looked over his shoulder at Ophis. She hadn't moved, but her gray eyes were fixed on Graphia. She gave a minuscule shake of her head. Noisy, was the clear, unspoken message. He turned back to Graphia. And what happens if I say no? Then the three factions will be forced to consider you an enemy of the established order, Graphia stated, her voice dropping a degree colder. And He will take the appropriate measures to neutralize the threat you and the Ouroboros dragon represent. It was a threat, delivered with perfect, polite precision. Naruto was silent for a moment. He could say no. He could fortify this estate and dare them to attack. He and Ophis could likely hold them off, maybe even win. But it would be a long, messy, and very, very loud war. It would be the exact opposite of what Ophis wanted. The path of the fist was the easy way, but it rarely solved the real problem. The better option was to face them head-on, not on a battlefield, but at a negotiating table. To look the kings of this world in the eye and tell them exactly what the new rules were. Okay, he said. Graphia blinked. Okay, yeah, okay, I'll go, Naruto confirmed. He then held up a finger. On one condition. Ophis comes with me. She sits at the table, right beside me. We're partners. You want to talk to me, you talk to us. This was a calculated move. It established that he wasn't Ophis's subordinate to be manipulated. Nor was she a simple power source he was exploiting. They were a unified front. It would also force the faction leaders to confront the being they had considered a distant, shadowy threat for centuries. Graphia's mind processed the condition. It was an unexpected complication, but not an insurmountable one. In fact, it might even be beneficial. Having both Onyo, Maways in one place could be more efficient. That is, acceptable, she conceded. Are you ready to depart now? Sure, Naruto said. He turned to Ophis. Ready for a field trip. We can have ramen when we get back. Ophis gave a slow, deliberate nod. She slid off the stool and walked to stand beside him. Graphia watched them, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. The most wanted being in existence, the infinite dragon god, was being treated like a child being taken on an outing. The dynamic between these two was stranger than any intelligence report had suggested. Very well, Graphia said, raising her hand. The silver magic circle flared to life on the floor once more. Please, step into the circle. Naruto placed a comforting hand on Ophis's shoulder and they stepped in together. The world dissolved into a dizzying torrent of silver light and crimson energy. Naruto's senses were flooded with the alien sensation of dimensional travel. It wasn't like his own body flicker or his father's flying thunder god technique, which bent space. This felt like tearing a hole in space and falling through it. He analyzed the process, the intricate formulas of the magic, committing it all to memory. It was always wise to know how your opponent's tricks worked. The journey lasted only a few seconds. When the light faded, they were standing in a vast, cavernous hall. The ceiling was so high it was lost in shadow, held up by thick pillars of obsidian carved with glowing demonic runes. The floor was polished red marble that reflected the crimson light of the chandeliers like pools of blood. Before them was a massive, circular table made of a dark, petrified wood. And sitting at that table were the most powerful beings in the world. Sears's Lucifer sat at the head of the table, his crimson hair a perfect match for his regal attire, his handsome face calm and welcoming, though his eyes held a keen, calculating intelligence. To his right was a woman in a magical girl outfit who radiated an aura of cheerful, bubbly power, Seraphal Leviathan. Next to her were two other men, one with glasses and a studious air, Ajuka Beelzebub, and another who appeared to be fast asleep, Falbium Asmodeus. The four great Satans. On Sears's left sat Azazel, the fallen angel leader, who gave Naruto a grin that was equal parts curiosity and appraisal. And next to him was a man who radiated a gentle, overwhelming light. He had long blonde hair and a dozen golden wings folded behind his back. He offered Naruto a soft, compassionate smile. Michael, the leader of the angels in heaven. The combined press of their auras was enough to atomize a mountain. It was an honor guard of gods and kings, a display of power meant to intimidate and overwhelm. It had absolutely no effect on Naruto or Ophis. Naru, 2/6 paths sage mode made him immune to such pressure tactics, his own energy a calm, deep ocean next to their raging rivers. Ophis, being a primal force of existence, didn't even seem to notice. "Welcome," Searsex said, his voice smooth and resonant. "I am Searsex Lucifer. Thank you for accepting our invitation." "Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto introduced himself simply, giving a slight nod. "And this is my partner, Ophis." The leaders all looked at Ophis. The legendary Ouroboros dragon, in the form of a small, gothic Lolita. She stared back at them, her gray eyes flat and empty. The silence as heavy with centuries of fear and animosity directed at the small girl, who seemed entirely indifferent to it all. "Please, have a seat," Searsex said, gesturing to the two empty chairs directly opposite him. Naruto pulled out a chair for Ophis, then took his own. The moment he sat, he felt it. A subtle, powerful web of energy closing around him. A restraint field. It was incredibly complex, woven from demonic, holy, and fallen angelic magic, designed to suppress the power of anyone within it. A cage for a god. He ignored it. So, he began, resting his elbows on the table and lacing his fingers together. "You wanted a dialogue. Let's dialogue." Azazel leaned forward, unable to contain his curiosity. "Let's cut to the chase. Who are you? Where are you from? The energy you use, it's not demonic, it's not holy. It's not magic as we know it. We have no record of you. You just appeared." "That's a long story," Naruto said. "The short version is, I'm not from around here. My business in this world is simple. Ophis wants her home back. I'm going to help her get it. That's it. That's the whole plan." "Her home being the dimensional gap," Michael said, his voice soft and sorrowful. "A goal which would require the removal of the Dragon of Dragons, Great Red. Such a conflict would threaten the stability of all dimensions." "We're working on it," Naruto replied vaguely. "Your recent sessions suggest a more proactive approach," Searsex interjected smoothly. "You have allied yourself with Ophis, the leader of the Chaos Brigade. You have assaulted my sister's peerage. You have single-handedly dismantled the leadership of the hero faction. These are not the actions of someone seeking a quiet life. Your sister's group attacked me first," Naruto countered, his voice even. "And hero faction was trying to recruit a bunch of broken soldiers for a war. I stopped them. It had nothing to do with you. As for the Chaos Brigade, Ophis already told me about them. They're a bunch of idiots using her name. I'm not with them." His answers were too simple, too direct. They cut through the expected layers of political maneuvering and left the faction leaders momentarily off balance. He wasn't playing their game. Seraphal Leviathan, who had been watching with wide, curious eyes, finally spoke up, her voice high and cheerful. "But Ophis Tan is a bad girl. She wants to destroy the world, right? So why are you helping her, Naruto-chan? Are you a bad boy, too?" Naruto looked at Seraphal, then glanced at Ophis. He saw her small hand clench slightly on the armrest of her chair. He reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. She relaxed. He turned his gaze back to Seraphal, and all traces of humor left his face. His blue eyes became as cold and hard as ice. "She's not a bad girl," he said, his voice dangerously low. "She's a lonely girl who wants some peace and quiet. She's never wanted to destroy anything. You've all spent so long treating her like a monster that you never bothered to actually listen to what she wants." The cheerful mask fell from Seraphal's face, replaced by a stunned silence. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The sheer protective intensity in Naruto's voice was palpable. "Your intentions may be noble," Ajuka Beelzebub finally spoke, his voice analytical. "But the fact remains, you are an unquantifiable power operating outside of any established framework. You are a threat to the balance we have worked so hard to maintain." "The only thing I'm a threat to is people who get in my way," Naruto stated bluntly. "Leave me and Ophis alone, and we'll leave you alone. It's that simple." "It's not that simple," Searsex said, his voice losing its welcoming tone and becoming steel. "Your very existence is a disruption. We cannot simply allow you to." Naruto sighed, looking bored. He unlaced his fingers and rested his right hand flat on the surface of the massive table. "Look," he said, his voice laced with a sudden weariness. "We can do this all day. You can threaten me, you can analyze me, you can try to bribe me. It's not going to work. As his palm made contact with the wood, the incredibly powerful, multi-layered restraint field that surrounded them wavered. For a split second, the air shimmered. Then, with a soundless flash of multicolored light, the entire complex magical construct shattered. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Its intricate formulas erased by a casual touch. The backlash sent a faint tremor through the entire hall. Every leader at the table felt it. Their ultimate trump card, a DxD, signed by the three most brilliant minds of their respective factions, had been broken as easily as a soap bubble. They stared at Naruto's hand, then at his calm, unimpressed face. Searsex's knuckles went white. Azazel's grin was gone, replaced by wide-eyed awe. Michael's gentle smile had become a look of profound concern. They finally understood. He wasn't just resisting their power. He was so far beyond it that their greatest efforts were literally beneath his notice. It was into this shocked, heavy silence that the new threat arrived. Without warning, every rune on the walls of the chamber flared with violent, defensive light. Alarms, silent and magical, shrieked through the minds of the Satans. The very fabric of the space around them was being torn at. "What is this?" Searsex demanded, leaping to his feet. "Report." Graphia appeared at his side. "Lord Lucifer, an unknown energy signature is attempting to breach the castle's dimensional defenses. It's holy in nature, but it's not from heaven. The power is incredible." Quote. Suddenly, a concentrated beam of pure, white gold light punched through the air in the center of the room. It wasn't an explosion. It was a surgical strike, a lance of divine power that bypassed layers of shields and wards. Its target was clear. It was aimed directly at Naruto. Before the beam could even reach him, Ophis acted. She raised a hand, and a small, perfect sphere of absolute nothingness, a piece of the dimensional gap itself, appeared in the beam's path. The lance of holy light struck the sphere and was swallowed whole, vanishing without a sound. The intrusion was repelled, but the shock of the attack lingered. The leaders stared at the spot where the beam had appeared, their minds reeling. Something had just attempted to attack them, to abduct someone from their presence, in the most secure location in the entire underworld. And it had almost succeeded. Naruto stood up, his eyes narrowed. He had felt the energy of that attack. It was holy, yes, but it was different from Michael's gentle, compassionate light. This had been cold, dogmatic, and utterly ruthless. An energy of purification. An energy of judgment. What was that? Azazel asked, his eyes wide. That, Naruto said, his voice a low growl, is a new player. And I think they're after me. The summit was over. The game had changed once again. Their conflict with Naruto and Ophis had just been violently overshadowed by the arrival of a third, unknown power, one with the strength and audacity to strike at the heart of the underworld. And Naruto Uzumaki was standing right in the center of it all. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. An enemy of my enemy. The silence in the grand hall was absolute, a stark contrast to the violent intrusion that had just occurred. The lingering scent of ozone and celestial power hung in the air, a phantom of the attack. Every leader present, beings who commanded armies and could reshape landscapes, was on their feet, their expressions a mixture of fury, shock, and a dawning, chilling realization. They had been blind. While they had been focused on their ancient, predictable rivalries, a new power had emerged from the shadows, a power with the will and the means to strike at the very heart of their domains. Searsex Lucifer was the first to recover his composure, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. Graphia, full defensive lockdown. I want every ward, every barrier at maximum. Get me a trace on that energy signature. Now. Already attempting, my lord, Graphia replied, her own voice tight. But the signature vanished the moment the attack was nullified. It was clean, no trail, no residue, as if it was never there. Impossible, Ajuka muttered, his analytical mind already dissecting the event. To bypass the castle's Dimensio, Null wards requires a mastery of spatial manipulation on par with, he trailed off, looking at Searsex. On par with them. Naruto paid them little mind. He was staring at the spot where the beam had manifested, his senses extended, tasting the faint echoes of the energy. It was the same cold, dogmatic purity he had felt from that watcher, who had observed his fight with the hero faction, but amplified 1,000 times. This wasn't an observation drone. This was a warship's main cannon. They're getting impatient, he said, more to himself than to the others. He turned to Ophis, who was looking at the spot with a flicker of something new in her eyes. It looked like annoyance. Her silence had been disturbed. That was a warden, she stated simply in his mind. A stronger one. They enforce the order of the previous biblical god. Quote, so, divine police, Naruto concluded. He turned back to the assembled leaders, who were now looking at him, the obvious target of the attack. It seems your rival has brought some unwanted attention to our doorstep, Uzumaki-san, Azazel said, his usual smirk gone, replaced by a grimly serious expression. Care to tell us who your friends are? They're not my friends, Naruto said flatly. They're a problem, and right now, they're my problem. He had no intention of dragging the three factions into his fight. He didn't know them, didn't trust them, and he certainly didn't want to be indebted to them. He had agreed to a meeting, not an alliance. He walked back to Ophis's side. Our business here is done. Thanks for the hospitality. We'll see ourselves out. Searzex stepped forward. Wait, you cannot simply leave. We were just attacked by a common enemy. Were we? Naruto countered, raising an eyebrow. Looked to me like I was attacked, in your house. You couldn't stop it. Ophis did. This has nothing to do with you. His words were blunt, bordering on insulting, but they were the undeniable truth. Their combined power and defenses had failed. He placed a hand on Ophis's shoulder, ready to use his own spatial technique to leave. He had seen enough of their world's teleportation magic to get the gist of it. This enemy is a threat to us all, Michael insisted, his gentle face etched with concern. Their power is holy in nature, yet it does not originate from the heavenly host. This is a schism, an unknown threat we must face together. Naruto paused. He looked at Michael, the leader of heaven. The angel's plea was genuine, not a political maneuver. He could feel the sincerity in his energy. But it didn't change the facts. I appreciate the sentiment, Naruto said, his tone softening slightly, but I work best alone. You have your factions to worry about. I have my partner. Let's keep it that way. He gave a final nod. Searzex, Azazel, Michael. It's been educational. Before they could protest further, a swirl of golden energy and distorted space enveloped Naruto and Ophis. With a faint pop, they vanished, leaving the most powerful beings in the world standing alone in their violated sanctuary, the silence ringing with the implications of what had just happened. They were no longer the biggest players on the field. The transition back to the Kuo estate was instantaneous. Naruto appeared in the center of the living room, Ophis beside him. The house was as silent and still as they had left it. Well, that was a bust, Naruto said, stretching his arms. All that way for a 5-minute meeting and an assassination attempt. Ophis drifted back to her couch, settling into her usual spot. They are afraid, she stated. Of you, of me, of what we represent, and now, of the wardens. Fear makes them noisy. Yeah, I got that, Naruto replied, running a hand through his hair. That warden, its power had been immense. The attack was precise, designed for abduction or annihilation. They knew who he was, and they had escalated from observation to direct action. It meant they saw him as a legitimate threat. He should have been worried. Instead, he felt a familiar, long-dormant thrill. A real challenge. Suddenly, he froze. His head snapped up, his senses, still on high alert from the meeting, screaming a warning. It was a spike of energy. Immense and violent, erupting right in the center of Kuo town. It was that same cold, holy power from the underworld, but this time it wasn't a focused beam. It was an explosion, a raw, expanding sphere of divine judgment. Naruto, it's the devils from the park. Kurama's voice roared in his head. They're there, and their energy is flickering, being snuffed out. Naruto's eyes widened. He could feel it too. The distinct signatures of Ryusuke Mori in her peerage, right at the epicenter of the blast. But he also felt something else, something that made his blood run cold. The holy energy wasn't just attacking them, it was sinking into the ground, latching onto the town's ley line, the invisible river of natural energy that flowed beneath the city. It was poisoning it, turning it into a catalyst for a massive explosion. They're not just targeting the devils, he breathed, a horrifying realization dawning on him. They're going to blow up the whole city to get to them. Sanitization, Ophis said, her voice a flat whisper from the couch. A common warden tactic. Destroy the nest to eliminate the infestation. The nest itself is irrelevant. Irrelevant. An entire city of innocent human beings, sleeping in their beds, completely unaware that their lives were considered acceptable collateral damage. The thought ignited a firestorm in Naruto's soul. This was not a fight over territory or ideology. This was the indiscriminate slaughter of the innocent. This was a line that was never, ever to be crossed. Ophis, stay here, he commanded, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Seal the estate. Don't let anyone in or out. Without waiting for a reply, he vanished in a yellow flash. Kuo Academy's main courtyard was a smoking crater. At its center stood a being of terrifying divine beauty. It was humanoid, about 8 feet tall, and forged from what looked like white gold and living light. It had no face, only a smooth, featureless helm from which 4 pairs of angelic wings, made of pure energy, unfurled. It held no weapon. Its very presence was a weapon. This was a virtue class warden, a divine instrument of destruction. Around it, the Grimoire peerage was broken. Kiba lay half buried under a shattered statue, his demonic sword dissolved into black dust, his body covered in holy burns. Kaneko was on one knee, her arms trembling, blood dripping from her lips. She had tried to punch the warden and had been repelled by an absolute defensive field of holy light that had nearly shattered every bone in her body. Akano was slumped against a wall, her clothes singed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her holy lightning, a power that was anathema to devils, had been effortlessly absorbed and turned back against her by a being of pure, unadulterated holiness. Issei was a mess, his boosted gear armor cracked and smoking, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. He had tried a dragon shot, and the warden hadn't even bothered to block it, letting the demonic energy wash over it harmlessly before swatting him out of the air like an insect. Only Rias was still standing, barely. Her crimson power of destruction swirled around her, a chaotic storm of demonic energy. But it was sputtering. She was exhausted, her reserves nearly depleted. She stood protectively in front of her fallen friends, her body a shield against the impassive divine engine of death before them. Why? She gasped, her voice raw. We have no quarrel with heaven. The warden's voice echoed, not from a mouth, but from all around them, a chorus of perfect, he-sized tones that was utterly devoid of emotion. You are a demonic entity. A source of corruption. This territory has been flagged for sanitation due to the presence of a Category Alpha foreign threat. Your eradication is a secondary objective. Before Rias could process the words, the warden raised its hand. A sphere of blinding white light began to form in its palm, pulsing with enough power to not only erase them, but the entire school and a significant portion of the city. This was it. They had been completely and utterly outclassed. They were going to die. As the light reached its peak intensity, a streak of yellow lightning flashed between them. Naruto appeared, his back to Rias, his arms spread wide in a protective stance. He wasn't even looking at the warden. He was looking at her fallen peerage, a deep, sorrowful anger in his blue eyes. The warden, its logic momentarily disrupted by the sudden appearance of its primary target, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Primary target, Naruto Uzumaki. Cease resistance and surrender for judgment. Naruto ignored it. You're all idiots, he said to Rias, his voice a low growl. I told you to stay out of my way. What were you thinking, taking on something like this? Rias stared at his back, at the iconic Hokage Haori he now wore, its white fabric a stark contrast to the night. We had to, she choked out. It appear, Ed in our territory, it was our responsibility to protect. Naruto's shoulders slumped slightly, he let out a long, weary sigh. Responsibility. It was a word he understood all too well. He couldn't fault them for trying to protect their home, even if it was suicidally foolish. Stay back, he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. All of you, your demonic energy is like fuel for this thing's attacks. You're only making it stronger. Get your friends and get clear. Now, he turned to face the warden. The sphere of light in its hand was still growing, ready to be unleashed. Hey, Tin Can, Naruto shouted, a cocky, defiant grin spreading across his face. It was the same grin he had worn when facing down the 10 tails. You want me? Come and get me. The warden processed his defiance. Defiance noted. Resuming sanitation protocol. It launched the sphere of light. It wasn't a beam, it was a miniature sun, an expanding wave of pure annihilation that tore across the courtyard, vaporizing stone and earth as it came. Rias screamed his name, a wordless cry of warning and despair. Naruto didn't move, he simply raised his right hand. A black, spherical orb, one of his truth-seeking orbs, floated forward and met the attack head-on. There was no cataclysmic explosion. The moment the wave of holy light touched the black sphere, it was simply unmade. The light, the heat, the destructive force, all of it was nullified. Erased from existence by the ultimate defense. The warden stopped, its featureless faceplate tilted in what could only be surprise. Analysis. Subject is wielding a power of void and creation. A high-level reality-altering ability. Threat level reassessed. Escalating to extermination protocols. The wings of light on the warden's back flared, and it shot forward, its speed rivaling Kiba's. It aimed a punch at Naruto's chest, its fist cloaked in a concentrated aura of holy energy designed to punch through any defense and purify the soul within. Naruto met the punch with his own. His fist was cloaked not in light, but in the vibrant, natural energy of Six Paths Sage Mode. Fist met fist. The shockwave was not an explosion of sound and fury. It was a wave of pure conceptual opposition. Holy energy versus natural energy. The ground beneath them didn't shatter, it turned to dust. The air didn't crackle, it warped. For a moment, the two opposing forces held each other in perfect, terrifying equilibrium. Then, Naruto's power won. Cracks of golden light spread up the warden's arm. With a final push, he shattered its arm into 1,000 shards of fading light. The warden recoiled, its arm already beginning to regenerate. Subject's energy is dominant over celestial power. This data is critical. Before Naruto could press his advantage, the warden's wings flared again. And it shot straight up into the sky, hovering 100 feet above the school. It spread its arms wide, activating wide area purification sequence. Target: Kuo Town Leyline. LL life signs in the designated radius will be extinguished. A massive, complex magic circle of golden light spread out from the warden, covering the entire sky above the town. The ground began to tremble violently as the ley line beneath them screamed in protest, its energy being corrupted and weaponized, turned into a city-wide bomb. The Grimoire Peerage, having pulled themselves to the edge of the crater, watched in horror. They were powerless to stop it. No, you don't, Naruto roared. He created a dozen shadow clones in an instant. Go, he commanded them. Find the anchor points of that array and break them. The rest of you, with me. He and 3 of his clones began gathering energy at a terrifying rate. A sound like 1,000 shrieking winds filled the air as 4 massive, spinning shurikens made of pure chakra materialized above them. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. They hurled the devastating attacks into the sky. The warden, focused on its ritual, created a barrier of light to intercept them. The first 3 Rasenshurikens slammed into the barrier, exploding with enough force to shake the heavens, but the barrier held. But the 4th one was different. As it flew, Naruto made a single hand seal. Sage Art. Lava-style Rasenshuriken. The spinning blade of wind was instantly infused with the boiling, corrosive power of the 4 tails, Son Goku. It turned a molten red, and when it struck the holy barrier, it didn't just explode, it melted through. The holy light sizzled and dissolved against the overwhelming power of the Biju-enhanced Sage Art. The Rasenshuriken tore through the barrier and slammed directly into the warden's chest. The divine construct shrieked, a sound of static and dying choirs, as millions of microscopic wind blades infused with lava chakra shredded it on a cellular level, simultaneously vaporizing and sealing its ability to regenerate. At the same time, Naruto's other clones reached the anchor points of the massive magic circle. They slammed Rasengans into the glowing runes, shattering the ritual. The immense pressure on the ley line vanished, and the terrifying golden circle in the sky fizzled and died. The warden, its body flickering, its form destabilizing, fell from the sky. Before it hit the ground, it turned its featureless face towards Naruto. Combat data transmitted. Lord Metatron has all he needs. The wardens are absolute. The order will be maintained. With a final flash of light, it imploded, leaving behind nothing but motes of fading gold. Silence returned. The crisis was over. Naruto landed softly in the center of the crater, breathing a little heavily. That had taken more out of him than he'd expected. The warden was a powerhouse, designed specifically to counter the supernatural beings of this world. It was his unique sage energy that had given him the decisive edge. He turned to look at the edge of the crater, where the Grimoire peerage was staring at him. Their expressions were no longer fearful or suspicious. They were looking at him with a raw, unadulterated awe that he hadn't seen since the end of the war. They had been on the brink of annihilation, utterly helpless, and he had saved them. He had saved their city. He walked over to them, his face grim. He knelt beside Kiba, whose burns were already starting to heal thanks to his demonic constitution. Naruto placed a hand over the worst of the wounds. A gentle, green chakra flowed from his palm, accelerating the healing process, soothing the celestial damage. Kiba flinched, but then his eyes widened as the searing pain subsided into a dull ache. "Thank you," the swordsman whispered, his pride forgotten, replaced by genuine gratitude. Naruto just nodded, then moved to Kaneko, then Akeno, giving them a small measure of his healing chakra, enough to stabilize them. When he reached Rias, he simply stood, looking down at her. She met his gaze, her blue-green eyes filled with a storm of complex emotions: shame, relief, gratitude, and a profound, dawning respect. "I was wrong about you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You're not our enemy. You saved us. You saved everyone." "Why?" Naruto looked past her, at the city lights twinkling in the distance. At the thousands of sleeping people who had almost been erased. "Because it doesn't matter if you're a devil, an angel, or a human," he said, his voice heavy with the conviction of a lifetime of fighting for others. "No one deserves to die as acceptable collateral damage. No one." He turned to leave. "Wait," Rias called out. "Your name." I don't know your name." He paused, glancing over his shoulder. A small, tired smile on his face. "It's Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki." And with that, he vanished, leaving them alone in the ruins of their school, their entire worldview shattered and rebuilt in the image of the strange, heroic man who had just declared himself the protector of their city. Rias Grimoire finally understood. Naruto wasn't a potential threat to be managed. He was a force of nature. And by some miracle, he was on their side. Far away, in his realm of perfect light, Metatron watched the final combat logs from the Virtue class warden play out on a celestial screen. He saw the truth-seeking orb nullify the purification blast. He saw the warden's holy power being overpowered by the subject's sage energy. He saw the final, devastating Biju-enhanced attack that not only destroyed the warden's body but corrupted its very essence, preventing regeneration. He analyzed the data with cold, divine logic. His initial hypothesis was confirmed. Naruto Uzumaki's power didn't just resist celestial law, it adapted to it, consumed it, and overpowered it. He wasn't just a foreign contagion. He was an antibody, a conceptual counter to the very order Metatron was sworn to uphold. And worse, he had now forged an unwilling alliance with the local demonic powers. He was integrating, spreading his influence, his dangerous ideology of universal protection, ignoring the sacred boundaries between species, was infectious. Metatron closed his eyes. The time for single agents was over. The risk of allowing the subject to grow stronger, to form more alliances, was too great. He opened his eyes again, and they glowed with a new, final resolve. The anomaly is a catalyst, he declared to the silent, listening cosmos. Left unchecked, it will grant the concept of infinity a new, unforeseen dimension of power. The mission has changed from apprehension to termination. Assemble the Seraphim class wardens. It is time for a final judgment. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Dragon's Heartbeat. The first rays of dawn were filtering through the large windows of the estate when Naruto returned. He materialized in the center of the living room, not with a flash, but with the quiet arrival of a morning shadow. The battle was over, the city was safe, but the victory felt heavy, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He sank onto the couch, the adrenaline from the fight draining away. leaving behind a profound weariness that was more than just physical. He had fought in a war that had claimed the lives of tens of thousands. He had seen friends die, had witnessed villages turn to craters. But the warden's cold, mechanical logic, the designation of an entire city of living, breathing people as an acceptable loss, had stirred something dark and familiar within him. It was the same detached cruelty he'd seen in men like Danzo, the same chilling philosophy that Obito had embraced in his despair. The idea that ideals were worth more than people. It was the one poison he could never stomach. Ophis was there, sitting in her usual spot on the opposite couch. She hadn't moved, but he could feel that she had been aware of the entire battle, had watched it unfold through his senses. A silent passenger in his mind. Her gray eyes were fixed on him, her expression as unreadable as ever, but her focus was absolute. "You are angry," she stated, her voice a soft echo in his thoughts. It wasn't a question, it was an observation, like noting the color of the sky. Naruto leaned his head back, staring up at the high, shadowed ceiling. "Yeah, I am. You won," she pointed out, a logical, simple fact. "The noise has stopped. Winning isn't the point," he said, his voice low. "It's why I had to win. That thing, it was going to wipe out thousands of innocent people without a second thought. To it, they were just bugs in a nest that needed to be burned. It makes me sick." He closed his eyes, and faces from his past swam in the darkness behind his lids. The pained look on Nagato's face as he described the death of his parents. The haunted eyes of Gaara, a child twisted into a monster by fear and loneliness. The quiet resolve of Itachi, who had sacrificed his entire world for the sake of his village and his brother. They had all been victims of a system that treated people like pieces on a board, disposable assets for a greater cause. He had dedicated his entire life to breaking that system. And here, in a new world, he'd found the very same poison, just in a shinier, holier bottle. "In my world," he began, his voice quiet, "we had a saying. Those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. It was my first real lesson as a ninja. My sensei taught it to me." His thoughts drifted to Kakashi, and to Obito, the friend who had first spoken those words. It's easy to get lost in big ideas, in missions and politics and power. You forget that the whole point, the only point, is to protect the people you care about. The moment you decide someone's life is worth sacrificing for your goal, you've already lost. He fell silent, the weight of his own history filling the sterile room. He rarely spoke of these things. In Konoha, he was the Hokage, the symbol of victory and hope. He couldn't show this weariness, this lingering pain. It was a burden he carried alone, with only Kurama as his witness. But here, with this ancient, emotionless being, it felt different. She wasn't judging him, she was simply listening. "Why?" Ophis asked after a long moment, her single-word question cutting through his reverie. "Why what? Why do you care about them?" She clarified. "The humans in the city. The devils in the school. They are not your comrades. You do not know them. They are strangers." Naruto opened his eyes and turned his head to look at her. It was a genuine question, born not of cruelty but of a complete lack of context. For a being who had existed in solitude for eons, the concept of altruism, of fighting for people you had no personal connection to, was a foreign language. He thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. "When I was a kid," he began, "I was alone. Everyone in my village, they looked at me with fear, with hatred. They saw a monster, not a person." He didn't need to explain Kurama to her, she already understood. "I didn't have any friends. No family. I was just a stray. The only thing I wanted in the entire world was for someone to look at me and see me. For someone to acknowledge that I was there." He saw a flicker of something in her gray eyes. A resonance. Not pity, but understanding. Alone. Astray. These were words she understood on a cosmic scale. "The first person who ever did that," Naruto continued, a faint, sad smile on his lips, "was my teacher at the academy, Iruka-sensei. He bought me ramen. He talked to me. He told me he knew how hard it was, being alone. That one person, that one moment, it saved me. It was the first brick in the foundation of the person I am today." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. I fight for the strangers because I was that stranger. I know what it feels like to be on the outside. To be looked at like you're worthless or dangerous. I fight so no one else has to feel that way. I fight because I want to build a world where everyone has someone who will buy them ramen. His simple, heartfelt explanation hung in the air. It wasn't a grand philosophy. It was a personal creed, forged in the fires of a lonely childhood. Ophis was silent for a long time, processing his words. Ramen, she finally said, her voice a soft murmur in his mind. You said it could change a life. It changed mine, Naruto confirmed with a nod. He saw the connection she was making, the logical line she was drawing. She was beginning to understand. He was giving her a new vocabulary, not of words, but of feelings. This, sadness, you feel, she ventured, testing a new word. Is it because of the strangers who almost died? Naruto was taken aback. She was trying to categorize his emotions, to put a name to the storm she sensed within him. Partly, he admitted, but it's also for the ones I couldn't save. My master, Jiraiya, my friend, Neji, my parents. There's always a cost, Ophis. Every battle leaves scars, not just on your body. He stood up, the restlessness returning. The sterile WHITE walls of the estate felt like they were closing in. Come on, he said, an idea forming. You want to understand, I'll show you. Let's get out of this morgue. She tilted her head. Where are we going? Home, he said. You're home. She stood without question, her trust in him now implicit. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, and with a familiar distortion of space, they left the house and plunged into the swirling, silent beauty of the dimensional gap. Here, in the endless, calm river of creation, the tension in Naruto's shoulders began to fade. The silence was not empty, it was full of potential. It was the quiet of a blank page, waiting for a story. He understood now why she loved it so much. It was peace, in its purest form. They floated in the void, surrounded by the slow, cosmic dance of color. You said you want the silence back, Naruto said, his voice soft in the non-space. Tell me what it feels like. What does Great Red's noise do to you? Ophis looked out into the shifting nebulae of her home. Before him, she began, her mental voice taking on a new, deeper quality. It was all like this. Calm, infinite. I could be. There was no thought, no action, just existence. It was perfect. She struggled for the right concept. It was like a sleep with no dreams. And Great Red, Naruto prompted gently. He is the dream, she said, a trace of something bitter entering her tone. He is an endless storm of chaos. Ideas, possibilities. His presence is a vibration. A constant, jarring friction against my being. It is the sound of 1,000 realities being born and dying every second. It is a scream that never ends. It pushes me out of my own home. It makes it impossible to be. Naruto finally understood. It wasn't a territorial dispute. It was an existential one. Great Red wasn't just an intruder. He was a fundamental violation of her very nature. Her infinite stillness versus his infinite chaos. He was a cosmic migraine that had lasted for millennia. I get it, Naruto said quietly. You just want the noise to stop, so you can rest. He looked at her, at the small, lonely god floating in the wreckage of her own peace. I can't give you your silence back yet. But maybe, I can share a different kind of quiet with you. He closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself, past the memories of war and pain, to something simpler. Something purer. He the memory of that day with Iruka at the ramen stand. The warmth of the bowl in his hands. The savory steam on his face. The kind look in his teacher's eyes. The feeling of being seen. The quiet contentment that had settled in his heart. A feeling that had told him everything was going to be okay. He didn't project the images into her mind. He projected the feeling. He took that warmth, that contentment, that flicker of hope, and gently extended it to her through their growing bond. Ophis flinched, her eyes widening slightly. It was a sensation completely alien to her. For her entire existence, she had known only two states. The perfect, cool stillness of her silence, and the jarring, chaotic friction of Great Red's presence. This was something else entirely. It was a soft, gentle warmth spreading through the core of her being. It was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with a comforting, steady presence. It didn't demand anything. It didn't disrupt her. It just was. A peaceful, golden light in her endless gray existence. She looked at Naruto, who still had his eyes closed, sharing this intensely personal piece of his soul with her. She saw not the demigod who had defeated armies and monsters, but the lonely boy at the ramen stand. She saw the core of who he was. And in that core, she found a reflection of her own solitude, but also its antidote. Slowly, hesitantly, she drifted closer to him. The movement was so subtle it was barely perceptible. She watched his face for a long moment, the face of the only being in all of creation who had ever tried to understand her instead of use her. The only one who had ever offered her comfort instead of demanding her power. She had existed for eons. She had commanded armies. She was a being of infinite power. But in that moment, she did something utterly new. She sought comfort. With emotion so delicate it seemed to take an eternity, she leaned forward and gently rested her head on his shoulder. Her long black hair spilled over his jacket. Her small frame was a feather lightweight against him. It was the most profound gesture of trust she was capable of making. An admission that his presence, this new, warm quiet he offered, was a sanctuary she had never known she needed. Naruto's eyes opened. He felt the small weight on his shoulder, the soft touch of her hair against his neck. His breath caught in his throat. He understood, with perfect, sudden clarity, the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't a strategic move. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a connection. A dragon, who had only ever known the silence of solitude, was choosing to share a new kind of silence with him. A genuine, warm smile touched his lips. The weariness, the anger, the weight of the battle, it all seemed to melt away, replaced by a fierce, tender protectiveness. He slowly, carefully, raised his arm and wrapped it around her small shoulders, holding her close. They floated there together in the heart of the cosmos, two lonely, powerful beings who had found a quiet harbor in each other's company. His restless storm was calmed by her stillness, and her empty silence was filled with his warmth. It was no longer a pact. It was a promise. It was in this moment of perfect, shared peace that the universe decided to strike back. As they floated in their silent embrace, a subtle, insidious change was occurring in a realm far beyond their perception. In his cathedral of pure law, Metatron stood at the center of a celestial orrery, its gears and rings made of solidified concepts. He was not gathering an army. He was rewriting a fundamental theorem of existence. With his 7 pairs of wings spread wide, he channeled his divine authority, his very being an instrument of cosmic law. He reached into the source code of reality, into the axioms upon which the multiverse was built, and with a voice that was both a whisper and a thunderclap, he spoke a new law into being. Let it be decreed, his voice hoed through the architecture of creation, that which is infinite shall be defined by its end. Let it be known that which is without limit must have its nature bound. Let the concept of infinity begin its long decay into the finite. A wave of pure, divine logic rippled out from his realm. It wasn't an attack. It was a cosmic software patch, a quiet, irresistible amendment to the rules of reality. In the dimensional gap, Ophis suddenly stiffened in Naruto's arms. A tremor, so faint he almost missed it, ran through her body. She let out a soft, sharp gasp, a sound of pain and confusion. She pulled back, her gray eyes wide, a flicker of something that looked like fear in their depths for the first time. Ophis, what is it? Naruto asked, his voice sharp with concern. I don't know, she whispered in his mind, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. She held up her hand, staring at it as if it were a foreign object. Something is wrong. The silence, it feels frayed. She looked weaker, smaller. The aura of absolute, infinite presence that always surrounded her had a tiny, almost imperceptible waver in it, like a flame sputtering in a sudden draft. Metatron's attack had begun. It wasn't a lance of holy light or an army of angels. It was a slow, creeping poison, woven into the very definition of her being, designed to unravel her from the inside out. And neither of them even knew the war had already started. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The dreamer stirs. The warmth of their shared moment vanished, replaced by an invasive, alien chill. Naruto felt Ophis tremble in his arms, a shish. Utter that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with a fundamental violation of her being. He pulled back instantly, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. Any trace of an enemy's energy. There was nothing. His senses, which could detect the faintest ripple of chakra or malice from a continent away, found no wound, no curse, no foreign presence latched onto her. And yet, she was clearly in pain. Her normally placid gray eyes were wide, a storm of confusion churning within them. She held her hands up, staring at her own fingers as if they might dissolve at any moment. "What's wrong?" Naruto demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "What did you feel?" "It's me," she whispered, her mental voice thin and strained. "The connection to everything, to myself, it has static in it. There are holes in infinity." The concept was so paradoxical it made Naruto's head spin. He channeled a gentle stream of his own sage energy towards her, a calming, healing aura meant to soothe and restore. But it was like pouring water on a ghost. His energy passed through her without finding purchase, without sensing anything to heal. This wasn't a wound of the body or the spirit. It was an injury to her very definition. "This is bad, Naruto," Kurama's voice rumbled, a deep, primal growl of concern. "Her power signature is fluctuating. It's a massive Biju suddenly forgetting how to control its own chakra. Her existence is becoming unstable." Before Naruto could try to comprehend the incomprehensible, the dimensional gap itself began to react to its master's distress. The gentle, swirling rivers of cosmic color turned violent. The placid blues and purples were streaked with angry, jagged lines of crimson and sickly green. The silent peace was broken by a low, dissonant hum that vibrated in the very marrow of his bones. It was the sound of a universal tuning fork being struck by a hammer. Ophis cried out, a small, sharp sound of pain, and clutched her head. "The noise," she gasped. "It's getting louder." It was more than just louder. The chaotic, dream-like energy of Great Red, which had always been a persistent but distant pressure on the far edges of the gap, was now surging towards them. It was a tidal wave of pure concept, a tsunami of raw, untamed possibility. Ophis's weakening grip on her own infinite nature had created a vacuum, and her eternal rival, the embodiment of chaos, was rushing in to fill it. A pressure unlike anything Naruto had ever felt began to build. He had stood before the 10 Tails, faced down Kagaya Otsutsuki, the progenitor of chakra itself. He had held the power of all 9 Biju within him and wielded it as his own. But this was different. This wasn't the pressure of immense energy. It was the pressure of an entire reality, an entire philosophy of existence, bearing down on him. And then came the roar. It was not a sound. It had no decibels, no frequency. It was a roar of pure Drea. That bypassed his ears and exploded directly in his mind. He was slammed with a billion incoherent visions simultaneously. Cities made of melting clocks, oceans of fire that sang opera, stars being born from the laughter of children. The feeling of falling upwards into a solid wall of sorrow. It was a direct, unfiltered blast of the apocalypse dragon's consciousness, and it was enough to drive any lesser being irrevocably insane. Naruto gritted his teeth, his 6 paths sage mode flaring to life like a golden sun, his own immense spiritual energy forming a shield around his mind and Ophis's. He weathered the psychic storm, his focus a single, unbreakable point: protect her. The roar subsided, but the pressure remained, growing stronger with every passing second. The very fabric of the gap was tearing, and through the rips and fissures, the raw, unfiltered crimson of Great Red's territory bled through. Ophis was weakening rapidly. She slumped against him, her breathing shallow, her eyes half closed. "He is coming," she managed. "He feels it. My weakness. He is coming to finish it." Naruto tightened his grip on her, pulling her behind him. He faced the direction of the surging chaos, his body a living shield. He didn't know if he could fight a being made of dreams, a creature that was less a living thing and more a walking dimension. But it didn't matter. He had made a promise. "Let him come," Naruto growled, his voice a low thunder that pushed back against the encroaching chaos. "He'll have to go through me." In the capital city of Lilith, the world broke. Sears X Lucifer was in his office, deep in a frantic telepathic conference with Michael and Azazel, trying to make sense of the Warden attack, when the sky tore open. It wasn't a metaphorical tear. The perpetual sea, crimson twilight that served as the underworld sky literally cracked, like a pane of glass struck by a stone. Through the fissures, a terrifying, chaotic light, a color that had no name, pulsed violently. The entire castle, a structure that had stood for millennia, shook to its foundations. Alarms, ancient and terrible, began to shriek, their magical wails echoing through every hall. Graphia appeared in a flash of silver. Her perfect composure finally shattered, her face pale with a level of alarm Searsex had never seen. My lord, the dimensional barriers are collapsing. There is a pressure emanating from the dimensional gap. It's a level of power we have never recorded before. It's Great Red. Azazel's voice crackled through the communication line, laced with a grim awe. The DxD bastards finally decided to wake up and stretch his legs. The Apocalypse Dragon is on the move. Why now? Michael's voice was strained, the usual gentle calm replaced by dire urgency. He has been dormant for centuries. Content to drift in the gap. What could have provoked him? Searsex looked at the cracking sky, his mind connecting the dots with horrifying speed. Ophis's new, unknown partner. The attack from a new, celestial enemy. And now, the awakening of the Dragon of Dragons. All of these events orbited one man. Naruto Uzumaki. Searsex breathed. It's him. He's the catalyst for all of this. He didn't know how, but he knew with absolute certainty that the blonde shinobi was at the epicenter of this cosmic storm. The balance of the world hadn't just been disrupted, it had been thrown into a blender. Can we fight him? Seraphal's voice cut in, frantic and for once, devoid of any cheer. We don't fight Great Red, Azazel replied, his voice flat. We don't have anything to fight him with. He's not a creature. He's a walking cataclysm. Our strongest attacks would be like throwing spitballs at a typhoon. All we can do is reinforce our territories and pray the damage is contained to the gap. The message was clear. They were helpless. The kings of the world, the leaders of angels and devils, could do nothing but watch as a force beyond their comprehension threatened to unravel reality itself. All their power, all their politics, were utterly meaningless in the face of true, primal chaos. In the heart of the storm, Naruto stared into the approaching apocalypse. The swirling colors of the gap finally ripped open completely, revealing the realm beyond. It was a hellscape of pure, raw creation. A dimension of seething, crimson energy, where physics was a drunken stew. Gestion and reality was in a constant state of flux. And from the depths of that chaos, he emerged. Great Red was not a dragon in the conventional sense. He was a moving mountain range of raw concept. His scales not scales but nascent universes being born and dying in an instant. His eyes were twin supernovas of pure dream, and his wings were tears in the fabric of space that stretched into impossible geometries. He was so vast that Naruto's senses couldn't even process his full form. He could only perceive a fraction of the beast, the way a microbe might perceive the foot of a human. The Dragon of Dragons, the Apocalypse Dragon, the true Red Dragon God Emperor, fixed his gaze upon the two small figures floating in the void. His focus was entirely on Ophis, on the delicious, tantalizing scent of her fading infinity. He saw his chance, after eons of stalemate, to finally claim the gap as his own, to expel the silence and fill it completely with his endless, glorious dream. The tiny Gaul, Den Nat standing in his way was an irrelevance. A low, guttural growl that was the sound of grinding galaxies echoed through the void. Great Red opened his maw, and a torrent of pure, unbridled chaos. A river of raw dream stuff that unmade reality as it passed, surged towards them. Naruto didn't flinch. He pushed the weakened Ophis further behind him. Kurama, full power. Now, you got it. The fox roared, his own chakra surging. Merging with Naruto's. A cataclysm of golden energy exploded from Naruto. His body was cloaked in a blazing aura of yellow light, his skin taking on the hue of the sun. The iconic black tomo marks of the Sage of Six Paths decorated his back and collar. Behind him, the energy solidified, expanding with breathtaking speed into a colossal avatar, the nine-tailed Kurama, rendered in pure, solidified golden chakra, a being of immense power and fury. The chakra construct of the nine-tailed fox, a beast that had been a walking natural disaster in its own world, was utterly dwarfed by the approaching dragon. It was a candle flame against a supernova. But the candle flame did not waver. Inside the Avatar's head, Naruto stood, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of grim determination. He looked at the weakened Ophis, who was staring up at the golden giant he had become, her gray eyes wide with a feeling she couldn't name. "Don't worry," Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by the Avatar. "I've got you." He turned back to the approaching wave of chaos. He raised the Avatar's hands, bringing them to its mouth. Negative and positive chakra, perfectly balanced, began to coalesce into a sphere of dense, world-breaking power. Tailed Beast Bomb, a sphere of condensed, violet-black energy, radiating a power that could obliterate entire mountain ranges, shot from the Kurama Avatar's mouth. It flew to meet the river of dream stuff pouring from Great Red's jaws. The two attacks met halfway. The collision was not an explosion. It was a schism in reality. For a single, terrifying moment, there was absolute silence and stillness as the two opposing concepts, the raw, destructive order of a Biju bomb and the raw, creative chaos of a dream breath, annihilated each other. Then, the universe screamed. Space-time itself fractured. Colors bled into sounds. The very concept of distance between them flickered and warped. Naruto was thrown back, the Kurama Avatar groaning, its chakra flickering as it struggled to hold its form against the sheer metaphysical pressure. The Biju bomb was gone. The dream breath was diminished, but it was still coming. Naruto gritted his teeth, pouring more of his own and Kurama's chakra into the Avatar, reinforcing its structure. The golden construct held, acting as a breakwater against the storm, the chaotic energies of the dragon's dream washing over it. Trying to unmake it, to dissolve it into a fantasy. It was the hardest fight of his life. He wasn't fighting power with power. He was fighting a living idea. He was trying to punch a nightmare. From his celestial throne, Metatron observed the cataclysm with cold, divine satisfaction. A screen of pure light before him showed the scene in the dimensional gap, the tiny golden avatar standing defiant against the endless crimson dragon. His plan was unfolding perfectly. As prophesied by the system, he murmured to himself, his voice serene. Chaos seeks to consume all. The infinite weakens. The dream rages. They will exhaust each other, breaking the fundamental balance they represent. The Ouroboros will fade, and the apocalypse dragon will overextend its concept, leaving it vulnerable. An angelic subordinate, a seraph of the highest order, appeared at his side, kneeling. My lord, the dimensional integrity of the lower realms is failing. The mortal world is at risk. The mortal world is a necessary casualty, Metatron stated, his voice devoid of any compassion. A flawed variable in the grand equation. Once the two conceptual dragons have crippled each other, we will descend. We will erase their fractured concepts from existence. We will sterilize the contaminated realms. And then, a new, perfect order, free from the chaotic variables of dream and infinity, can finally be established. The work of God will be complete. He looked back at the screen, at the struggling form of Naruto's avatar. And the foreign anomaly, he added, a hint of something like curiosity in his tone, will be erased along with them. A footnote in the final chapter of a flawed creation. The stage was set. The pieces were in motion. All he had to do was wait for the players to destroy each other. Back in the gap, Naruto held the line. The Kurama avatar was cracking, its golden light dimming under the relentless pressure. He was a dam holding back an ocean, and the dam was about to break. He had managed to weather the first wave, but Great Red was just getting started. The dragon hadn't even truly attacked yet, that had been a mere exhalation. He stood alone, the sole defender between a vulnerable god and an apocalypse of dreams, with the fate of more than one world resting on his shoulders. He would not let her fall. He would not let this world break. He would be the storm that met the apocalypse. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Sage of Six Paths and Two Worlds. The golden chakra of the Kurama avatar groaned, the sound of cracking light echoing in the chaotic void. Fissures spread across its surface, a network of spiderweb fractures threatening to shatter the construct entirely. Naruto poured every ounce of his and Kurama's power into reinforcing it. But it was like trying to patch a disintegrating dam with sand. The sheer, relentless pressure of Great Red's dream stuff was not an attack to be blocked. It was an environment, a hostile reality that was actively unmaking them. It's no good, Naruto. Kurama's voice roared in his mind, laced with a frustration the great fox hadn't felt in centuries. This isn't like fighting the 10 tails. That was just a beast of immense chakra. This thing isn't even really here. We're fighting a concept. Our attacks are being dissolved into nonsense before they even hit him. Kurama was right. The tailed beast bomb, an attack that could wipe a nation off the map, had been neutralized not by superior power, but by superior absurdity. It was like trying to punch the ocean. The ocean doesn't feel the punch, it simply absorbs it, swallows it, and remains the ocean. Great Red was an infinite ocean of chaos, and they were a single, defiant lighthouse being battered into ruin by a storm with no end. Naruto's teeth were ground so tight his jaw ached. He could feel the Avatar's limbs beginning to dissolve, the golden chakra fraying at the edges, turning into incoherent wisps of color and light that were then absorbed into the crimson tempest of the dragon's dream. He was losing. In a straight power-on-power confrontation, he was hopelessly, utterly outmatched. He risked a glance behind him. Ophis was huddled at the base of the Avatar's spine, a small, dark shape against the blazing gold. She was watching him, her gray eyes filled with a dawning despair. She had brought him here, her one hope, her one variable. And she was watching him be erased. The sight of that despair in her eyes ignited something fierce and defiant in Naruto's core. He was the #1 unpredictable ninja. When the front door was barred, you went through the window. When the window was sealed, you blew a hole in the wall. And when the wall was made of impossible, reality-bending dream stuff, you stopped trying to break it down. You found the doorbell. His mind raced, faster than the fourth Raikage's lightning-shrouded fists, faster than his father's yellow flash. He wasn't thinking about techniques or power levels. He was thinking about his life. He was thinking about every enemy he had ever faced who had seemed impossibly strong, impossibly out of reach. Gaara, protected by an absolute defense of sand. A lonely child twisted into a demon by fear. He hadn't broken through the sand with a bigger Rasengan. He had broken through with a headbutt and a desperate plea, a raw scream of shared pain. It had reached the boy inside the monster. Nagato, who had leveled Konoha with the power of a god, the Rinnegan. He hadn't defeated him with sage art. He had defeated him with a book. With the story of a shared master. With a promise to carry on his dream of peace, a promise that had resonated with the broken heart of a fellow student. Obito, who had declared war on the entire world, wielding the 10 tails as his weapon. The final victory hadn't come from a Biju bomb. It had come from pulling him into a shared mental landscape, from dragging him back from the brink by reminding him of the person he used to be. The boy who had also wanted to be Hokage. He had never won his most important battles by being stronger. He had won by being more stubborn, more hopeful, and, most importantly, by understanding. He had looked into the hearts of monsters and found the broken children within. He had faced down gods and reminded them of the men they once were. He looked from the despairing Ophis to the raging cosmic apocalypse that was Great Red. He saw not a monster to be slain, but a dynamic. Ophis was silence. Great Red was noise. It wasn't a battle between good and evil. It was a fundamental disagreement. And you didn't solve a disagreement by shouting louder. You solved it by listening. A wild, desperate, and utterly insane idea began to form in his mind. An idea so quintessentially I am that Kurama felt it and let out a mental groan of disbelief. Oh no, the fox rumbled. I know that look. You're going to do something monumentally stupid, aren't you? I'm going to do the only thing that's ever actually worked. Naruto shot back, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. Ophis. His amplified voice boomed, cutting through the chaos. She looked up, startled. I need you to trust me. Completely. Before she could answer, he did the last thing anyone would expect. He let go. With a final, groaning shudder, the colossal Kurama avatar dissolved. The golden light that had held back the storm vanished, plunging them into the full, overwhelming maelstrom of Great Red's presence. The psychic pressure increased 100-fold. The roar of a billion dying universes slammed into them. Naruto landed softly in the void, instantly creating a small, stable platform of chakra beneath his and Ophis's feet. He stood before her, his arms at his sides, his body utterly defenseless against the cosmic dragon. He was a single, Tiny man standing on a cosmic shoreline as a tsunami of reality itself bore down on him. "What are you doing?" Ophis cried out, her voice filled with panic. "Changing the rules of the game," Naruto said calmly. He closed his eyes, shutting out the terrifying vista before him. He ignored the raging storm, the unmaking of reality, the sheer, mind-breaking presence of the dragon. He turned his focus inward, then outward in a way he never had before. His Six Paths Sage mode was more than just a power-up. It was a state of profound, universal understanding. In his world, it connected him to the natural energy of the planet, allowing him to feel the life force of every living thing, to become one with the flow of nature itself. But this world's energy was different. It was a chaotic soup of demonic power, holy power, draconic power, and 100 other things he didn't have names for. He let his senses expand, not just pushing out, but opening up. He didn't try to dominate or control the energies of this new world. He listened to them. He felt the arrogant pride of demonic energy, the rigid, unyielding faith of the holy, the ancient, slumbering power of the draconic. He felt the ley line beneath Kuo Town, still humming with the aftershocks of the warden's attack. He felt the lingering despair of the forgotten exorcists, the fear of the Grimoire peerage. The cold logic of the Satans, the detached curiosity of Azazel. He absorbed it all. He let the language of this new universe flow into him, not as a source of power, but as a source of understanding. His own chakra, his own natural energy from a world of shinobi and biju, began to resonate with it. He wasn't just a visitor anymore, a foreign element. He was becoming a bridge, a translation key between two entirely different systems of existence. He was becoming a sage of two worlds. His body began to glow, not with the blazing gold of Kurama's chakra, but with a soft, gentle, all-encompassing white light. It was the light of pure harmony, of perfect balance. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. He was an extension of the life force of this world, and of his own. He opened his eyes. They were glowing with a serene, ancient wisdom. He looked at the approaching apocalypse, at the supernova eyes of Great Red, and he felt no fear. He felt only a profound, empathetic sorrow. He saw another being, like Kurama, like Ophis, like himself, who was a prisoner of its own immense, lonely power. He raised his hands, palms open, not in a stance of attack or defense, but of offering. And then, he spoke. Not with his voice, but with his soul. He reached out with his newfound, dual-world sage sense and touched the mind of the apocalypse dragon. He didn't try to invade it or control it. He simply knocked on the door. He sent out a single, pure feeling, "I am here. I am listening." The torrent of chaos that was Great Red's consciousness, the storm that had almost shattered Naruto's mind, faltered for a nanosecond. It was like a hurricane suddenly encountering a single, perfectly still point in its eye. For the first time in its eons of existence, something was not running from it. Not fighting it, but was actively trying to understand it. Curiosity, a concept so alien to the dragon it was almost painful, stirred in its cosmic soul. It focused a fraction of its infinite attention on the tiny, glowing speck of a man. Naruto felt the attention, the mental weight of a god's gaze. He didn't flinch. He began his argument. First, he projected Ophis. Not her power, not her threat, but her desire. He took the feeling he had shared with her just a short time ago, that profound, soul-deep yearning for a quiet that was like a dreamless sleep. And he laid it bare before the dragon of dreams. He showed Great Red what his noise, his very existence, felt like from her perspective. A constant, agonizing scream, a migraine that had lasted for millennia. He presented her not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a being in pain. Then, he projected himself. He showed the dragon the image of a small, lonely blonde boy on a swing. He showed him the cage within his own soul, the raging, hateful fox that had been his first and only companion. He projected the raw, aching loneliness of being a container for a power so great that it isolated you from everyone else. He was showing the greatest dragon in existence that a tiny human understood its burden. He followed it with the turning point, the moment he had first truly connected with Kurama. Not as a weapon, not as a prisoner, but as a friend. He projected the feeling of that first fist bump, the merging of two souls, the transformation of hatred into an unbreakable bond. He was showing the dragon of dreams, a dream he had never conceived of. The dream of companionship, of turning the beast inside from a burden into a partner. Finally, with the dragon's consciousness now captivated by this impossible story, Naruto made his closing argument. He projected a new dream. A new possibility for the dimensional gap. He showed Great Red a vision of the void, but not an empty one. He showed a reality where a corner of the gap was cordoned off, a perfect sphere of absolute, inviolate silence for Ophis to rest in. And the rest of it, the vast, infinite majority. It was Great Red's, a boundless canvas for his chaotic dreams. A playground where he could roar and create and dream to his heart's content, without causing pain to the one other being who called this place home. He wasn't asking the dragon to leave. He was offering a compromise. He was offering a vision of peace. A dream of a world where the silence and the storm could coexist. The assault stopped. The river of dream stuff receded. The chaotic, crimson energy pulled back. The mind-breaking roar faded into a low, curious hum. The supernova eyes of the great dragon blinked, a gesture that took a century and a second. They were no longer focused on Ophis's prey. They were focused on Naruto with an expression of utter, profound confusion. Great Red, a being of pure, instinctual chaos, had just been presented with a logical, empathetic argument. A creature of endless dreams had been shown a dream more complex and beautiful than any it had ever created on its own. It did not understand. It did not agree, but it was intrigued. The aggression, born of an eons-long stalemate, was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding curiosity towards the tiny, glowing being who had spoken to its heart instead of its hide. A truce, unspoken and unbelievable, settled over the dimensional gap. The storm had passed. The leaders of the three factions watched on their scrying mirrors as the impossible happened. The cataclysmic energy readings from the dimensional gap, which had threatened to tear their worlds apart, suddenly stabilized. The violent crimson light faded back to the familiar, swirling purples. The dimensional fissures began to mend themselves. The apocalypse had, for no reason they could comprehend, simply stopped. In Lilith, Searsek stared at the image of the now calm gap, his mouth slightly agape. What happened? I have no idea. Azazel's voice came back, strained with disbelief. 1 minute, he's about to be annihilated. The next, the dragon just stops. Did he beat him? No. Michael's voice was filled with a reverence that bordered on worship. He did not beat him. I think he forgave him. They couldn't know the details, but they understood the result. Naruto Uzumaki had faced down the Apocalypse Dragon, a being they considered an unstoppable force of nature, and had pacified it. He had achieved the impossible. He was not just a king-level power. He was a miracle worker, a being who operated on a plane of existence they couldn't even begin to comprehend. In his realm of perfect, unwavering order, Metatron's serenity finally broke. He watched on his celestial screen as the crimson chaos receded, as the golden avatar vanished, as the tiny blonde man stood unharmed before the pacified dragon. His cold, logical mind, which saw the universe as a complex but solvable equation, could not process this outcome. It was a mathematical impossibility. It was a rounding error the size of a galaxy. His plan had been perfect. It was based on the fundamental, immutable natures of the two dragons. The infinite and the dream. Silence and noise. They were opposing concepts, destined to clash until one or both were erased. It was a law of the universe. And this vermin, this foreign contagion, had broken that law. He hadn't used power. He had used empathy. He had weaponized understanding. He had injected the chaotic, illogical variable of compassion into a perfect, logical system. And it had brought the entire equation to a crashing halt. A tremor of pure, divine fury ran through Metatron. The pristine white light of his throne room flickered for the first time in millennia, taking on a harsh, angry glare. The celestial orrery around him spun erratically, its perfect symphony of movement disrupted by his rage. He finally understood the true nature of the threat. Naruto Uzumaki was not a physical danger to the system. He was an ideological one. He didn't just break the rules of reality, he convinced reality to rewrite its own rules. He didn't fight chaos, he befriended it. He didn't destroy his enemies, he changed them. This was a power far more dangerous than any holy spear or dragon's roar. It was a power that could dismantle Metatron's entire philosophy of order from the inside out. The time for observation, for planning, for subtle manipulation, was over. The time for subtlety had ended the moment the dragon's roar had faded. This philosophical infection had to be sterilized at its source. No more. Metatron's voice was a low, guttural snarl that cracked the very air of his holy sanctum. The time for games is over. The time for judgment is now. He raised his hand, and a silent, terrible command went out, a summons to the most powerful of his warriors. The final solution. Back in the dimensional gap, the silence that returned was different. It was not the empty, tense silence of an impending battle, but the calm, peaceful silence of its aftermath. Great Red still floated in the distance, a mountain of quiet curiosity, his chaotic energy now contained. Naruto let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for an eternity. The white light of his fused sage mode faded, and a wave of exhaustion, deep and profound, washed over him. He staggered, his legs suddenly weak. A small, cool hand grabbed his arm, steadying him. He looked down to see Ophis, her face pale, but her gray eyes fixed on him with an emotion he had never seen in them before. It was a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a fierce, possessive wonder. He hadn't just saved her. He had championed her deepest, most fundamental desire. He had given a voice to her silence. "You," she whispered, her mental voice trembling. "You spoke to him." Naruto gave her a tired, weary grin. "Yeah, he's not such a bad guy once you get to know him." Just loud. He had done it. He had faced the storm and calmed it. He had brought a moment of peace to the endless war. But as he looked at Ophis's awestruck face, he knew, with a sinking certainty, that all he had done was survive the prelude. The true storm, the one gathering in a realm of perfect, angry light, was yet to come. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Warden's Final Judgment. The quiet that settled over the dimensional gap was heavy with the echo of a silent miracle. Great Red, the Apocalypse Dragon, was no longer a maelstrom of rage but a vast, looming mountain of contemplative energy. He watched Naruto with an ancient, alien curiosity. The immediate threat of annihilation replaced by an unspoken, deeply perplexing truce. Naruto's legs buckled, the sheer spiritual and mental exhaustion of his ordeal hitting him like a physical blow. He had not just fought a god, he had held a therapy session with one. A cool, steadying hand was there to catch his arm, and he looked to see Ophis, her face pale and her power still frayed. But her gray eyes were fixed on him with an emotion so profound it was startling. It was reverence. "You gave my silence a voice," she whispered in his mind, the thought trembling with the weight of its own significance. Before Naruto could respond, before the fragile peace could even begin to solidify, the universe was violated. The swirling, gentle purples and blues of the dimensional gap were bleached from existence. A wave of sterile, featureless white light washed over everything, erasing color and texture, turning the infinite void into an infinite, antiseptic chamber. The silence, both Ophis's and the newfound truces, was shattered by a single, high-frequency hum, the sound of absolute, unwavering law. From the heart of the white void, a gateway tore open. It was not a swirling portal of magic but a perfect, geometric rift in reality, a clean, surgical incision. Through it, they came. First were the legions, hundreds of them. They were the virtue class wardens, identical to the one Naruto had destroyed in Kuo, their faceless helms and wings of light radiating a cold, impersonal power. They moved with silent, perfect synchronization, forming a celestial army that filled the void. Then came the elite, 7 of them. They were larger, their forms more complex, crafted from what looked like solidified starlight and divine geometry. Each carried a different weapon, a sword that cut concepts, a spear that pinned down fate, a shield that blocked possibilities. These were the Seraphim-class wardens, the personal guard of the voice of God. And finally, he descended. Metatron emerged from the rift, and the very fabric of the gap bowed before him. His 7 pairs of wings were spread wide, casting a light so pure, so orderly, it was painful to behold. His beautiful, severe face was no longer serene. It was a mask of cold, divine fury. The air around him did not crackle with power, it solidified, turning into a crystal lattice of absolute order. He surveyed the scene, the weakened Ophis, the exhausted Naruto, and the quiescent, watching form of Great Red. His eyes, burning with the light of 1,000 righteous suns, came to rest on Naruto. Philosophical contagion, Metatron's voice boomed, not as a sound, but as a judgment imprinted upon reality itself. You have interfered with the system. You have corrupted the fundamental laws of conflict. You have defied the sacred dialectic of chaos and order. He raised a hand, pointing a single, elegant finger that held the weight of divine authority. The Ouroboros dragon, the conceptual error of infinity. The apocalypse dragon, the chaotic variable of dream. And you, the foreign anomaly who seeks to reconcile the irreconcilable. All are declared threats to celestial stability. All are found wanting. The time for observation is over. The time for sterilization is now. By my authority as the voice of God, I pronounce judgment. A wave of absolute power rolled forth from him, a command that reality itself was meant to obey. But before it could reach them, the space in the void twisted violently. Dozens of magic circles, crimson, gold, and violet, blossomed in the white emptiness. From them RGED, the combined might of the three factions. Sears X Lucifer stood at the forefront, his power of destruction coiling around him like a crimson serpent. Beside him, Azazel unfurled his 12 fallen wings, a grim, determined look on his face. Michael appeared with a host of heaven's strongest angels, his gentle expression replaced by one of solemn resolve. Rias Grimori and her peerage, Sona Citri and hers, the other Satans. High-ranking angels, and the leaders of the Grigori, they had all come. This is no longer your private affair, Uzumaki, Sears X called out, his voice ringing with power. He didn't look at Naruto. His gaze fixed on the terrifying angelic legion. This is our world. You are standing on our battlefield. We will not stand aside while a tyrant from another realm decides its fate. A new distortion, a flash of silver and white light, appeared off to the side. From it emerged a young man in white dragon armor, his blue wings spread wide. Valley Lucifer, Albion, the white dragon emperor, pulsed with immense power on his back. What a magnificent gathering of power, Valley said, a feral grin spreading across his face. He ignored the factions, his eyes locked on Metatron. To think a being of this caliber existed. I was getting bored. He looked at Naruto. Don't get any ideas, Uzumaki. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to fight him. He's the ultimate prize. Naruto felt a surge of adrenaline cut through his exhaustion. He looked at the assembled armies, at the arrogant rival, at the determined kings. They were all noisy, complicated, and a massive pain. And in that moment, he was damn glad to see every single one of them. Looks like the party's just getting started, he murmured. A golden aura flared to life around him, Kurama's chakra flooding his system, revitalizing him. Metatron looked upon the assembled forces of the DxD world with an expression of utter contempt. Insects, he declared, gathering to defend a blight. It matters not, all will be purified. He gave a simple, downward chop of his hand. The war began. The Warden army moved as one, a silent, disciplined wave of white and gold. The combined forces of the three factions roared a challenge and met them head-on. The void erupted into a cataclysm of conflicting energies. Demonic power clashed with holy law. Angelic light spears shattered against celestial shields. The sky became a chaotic canvas of explosions, of desperate battles between beings of myth and beings of logic. The DxD factions fought with a desperate fury, but they were at a disadvantage. Every warden was a perfect anti-supernatural weapon. Their attacks didn't just wound, they unraveled demonic and holy energies. For every warden that fell, 2 devils or angels were critically injured, their very essences destabilized. Sears X became a whirlwind of destructive power, erasing entire phalanxes of wardens with a wave of his hand, but more always took their place. Azazel, leading the Grigori, fought with cunning and powerful light-based magic. But the wardens seemed to analyze and adapt to his strategies in real time. It was a battle of passion versus programming, and programming was proving brutally efficient. Amidst the larger chaos, the main event began. Valley, true to his word, shot forward like a silver comet, his armor screaming with power. Albion, divine dividing, divide, 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 divide. The gem on his armor chanted. its power reaching out to drain Metatron's divine energy. Metatron didn't even look at him. He simply raised one finger. "Let there be a law," he stated calmly. "That which is taken must be returned." Valley's draining power hit an invisible wall and was violently reflected. He cried out as his own divine dividing ability was turned against him, his own energy reserves being siphoned away at a terrifying rate. He was thrown back, his armor sparking and groaning. "Insolent child," Metatron said, dismissing him. Ophis acted next. She thrust her hands forward, and two immense serpents made of pure nothingness, holes in reality itself, lunged at Metatron. They were not meant to bite, but to erase. Metatron met their assault with another simple declaration. "Let there be a law. That which is nothing cannot exist where there is order." The space around him solidified into a perfect, conceptual crystal. The serpents of the void struck the law and were shattered, their infinite nature nullified by an absolute rule. Ophis staggered back, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of her mouth. She was too weak. Her infinity was frayed, and his order was absolute. "It's no good," Naruto shouted, appearing between them and the celestial tyrant. "He's not fighting us, he's rewriting the battlefield. We can't beat him at his own game." Metatron turned his full attention to Naruto. "You, at last, the source of the infection." He raised his hand. "Let there be a law. Let gravity be magnified 1,000-fold upon the contagion." Naruto was slammed down with an impossible weight. The chakra platform beneath him shattered, and he felt his bones begin to creak under the strain. He roared, flaring his six-path sage mode to its absolute maximum, his golden aura pushing back against the crushing law. He was resisting, but he was pinned. "It's over, anomaly," Metatron said, taking a step forward. "The system will correct itself." "Hey, voice of God," Valley's voice snarled from above. He had recovered, his pride wounded but his fighting spirit blazing. "Let's see how your system likes this." Half-dimension. Albion's power flared, and Metatron's entire being was suddenly compressed. The space around him shrinking, a power meant to have the existence of anything trapped within it. Metatron's expression didn't change. A futile gesture. He pointed at Valley. "Let there be a law. That which is halved shall be made whole again, and its container shall be shattered." Valley's half-dimension ability was instantly inverted. The power rebounded, and his balance breaker armor began to crack and overload. He was blasted out of the sky once more. But his attack had served its purpose. For the fraction of a second Metatron had focused on him, the law of gravity suppressing Naruto flickered. It was the opening Naruto needed. With a final, explosive roar, he broke free. He shot forward, not to attack, but to appear beside his two unlikely allies. "Listen to me," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "Both of you, we can't fight him head-on. He's the programmer. We need to crash the system." Valley glared, blood dripping from his helmet. "And how do you propose we do that?" "He has to focus to enact a law," Naruto explained, his mind working at lightning speed. "When he does, he's defining the rules. For that one instant, he's vulnerable. Ophis, your power is the opposite of his. It's pure, limitless potential. Can you create a single moment of absolute chaos? A glitch, something with no rules at all?" Ophis looked at him, her eyes widening as she understood. "It would take everything I have left," she said, her voice weak. "Valley." Naruto turned to the White Dragon Emperor. "I need the biggest, loudest, most arrogant attack you've got. You need to make him focus on you. To force him to enact a powerful law just to contain you. Can you do it?" Valley's blood-soaked grin was terrifying. "You're asking me to go all out against a god. That's all I've ever wanted." "Good," Naruto said, turning back to face the approaching Metatron. He began gathering his own power, Kurama's chakra mixing with the natural energy of two worlds, swirling into a vortex of unimaginable power in his right hand. "Because when he's focused on Valley, and Ophis gives us our opening, I'm going to hit him with everything." It was a desperate, insane plan. But it was the only one they had. "Now," Naruto roared. Valley let out a guttural scream, his cracked armor glowing with a malevolent, silver light. "I, who am about to awaken," he began the chant, not of the Juggernaut Drive, but of his own. "Refined Empireo Juggernaut Overdrive, am the heavenly dragon who has stolen the principles of domination from God." Metatron stopped, his eyes narrowing. The our valley was unleashing was enough to threaten the stability of the entire dimensional gap. A worm that chooses to burn itself to ash, he said. So be it. Let there be a law. Let the principle of domination be contained by absolute subjugation. He extended both hands, a massive, complex cage of golden law forming around valley, designed to contain and crush his rebellion. This was it. His focus was absolute. Ophis. Naruto yelled. Ophis's eyes glowed with a flat, gray light. She let out a silent scream, and her remaining power, her frayed connection to the infinite, erupted from her. It wasn't an attack. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated maybe. For a single, infinitesimal moment, every law of reality in a sphere around Metatron was suspended. The law of subjugation flickered. The law of order wavered. The universe itself held its breath. It was the glitch, the single moment of absolute chaos. And into that moment, Naruto struck. The energy in his hand was no longer a simple Rasengan. It was a miniature galaxy. It contained the ferocious power of Kurama, the perfect harmony of Six Paths Sage Mode, the balanced natural energy of two different worlds, and a core of pure, simple understanding. The very philosophy he had used to pacify Great Red. It was an attack that was both a weapon and an argument. A declaration that order and chaos, silence and noise, could and must coexist. Sage Art. Rasengan of Genesis. He roared, slamming the sphere of cosmic harmony directly into Metatron's chest. For the first time, Metatron's eyes widened in something that looked like shock. He was not struck by power, but by a paradox. The attack did not seek to destroy him, but to balance him. The concepts of harmony, chaos, and coexistence were utterly anathema to his being, a logical contradiction his system could not compute. His body of light, the physical manifestation of pure law, began to crack. But there was no explosion. Instead, the cracks began to shine with a brilliant, multi-colored light. The swirling purples of the gap, the crimson of Great Red's dream, the gold of Naruto's chakra, the silver of Valley's ambition, the gray of Ophis's silence. All the things he had sought to sterilize were now erupting from within him, breaking his perfect, sterile form apart. His physical body dissolved into a shower of beautiful, harmless light. His voice, for the last time, echoed through the void, not as a judgment, but as a fractured, disbelieving whisper. The system is flawed. Error. Recompiling. A single shard of concentrated white light, his core essence, shot back towards the celestial rift, which snapped shut behind it. He was not dead. He was banished, his physical form shattered, his divine logic broken, forced to retreat to his realm to reboot a system had just encountered a fatal exception error. As his presence vanished, so did his army. The wardens, both Virtue and Seraphim, flickered and dissolved into motes of light, their connection to their master severed. The battle was over. Silence, true and profound, descended. The combined forces of the three factions, battered and bleeding, stared in mute awe. Valley collapsed to his knees, his advanced armor shattering and falling away, leaving him exhausted but grinning triumphantly. Ophis swayed, her energy completely spent, and fell backward, caught gently by Naruto. Naruto stood in the center of it all, his body aching. His chakra reserves scraped dry, but he was standing. He held the unconscious form of the infinite dragon god in his arms, her quiet breathing a soft rhythm against his chest. He looked out at the silent battlefield, at the watching dragon in the distance, at the armies of his new, chaotic world, and let out a long, slow breath. The judgment had been rendered, but not by the one who had pronounced it. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. A new home, a new dawn. The silence that followed the storm was a physical presence. It was the silence of a held breath, of a universe stunned into stillness. The violent white light of Metatron's judgment had faded, returning the dimensional gap to its familiar, swirling tapestry of cosmic purples and blues. The phantom screams of battle were gone, replaced by a quiet so profound it felt sacred. Naruto stood in the epicenter of that quiet, the unconscious form of Ophis held securely in his arms. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing a soft, steady rhythm that was the only anchor in the vast emptiness. He was drained, every fiber of his being screaming with an exhaustion that went beyond chakra depletion. It was the soul-deep weariness of a man who had just argued a god into submission. The combined armies of the three factions floated in the distance, a scattered, battered fleet of myth and legend. They were no longer soldiers, they were witnesses. They stared across the void at the lone man in the orange and black jacket, their expressions a universal mosaic of awe, disbelief, and a grudging, absolute respect. Slowly, three figures detached themselves from the main host and drifted towards him. Sirzek's, his regal clothes torn and singed, his crimson aura muted but steady. Michael, his golden wings looking slightly frayed, his gentle face filled with a solemn gratitude. And Azazel, who had a long gash on his cheek and was missing a few feathers from his fallen wings, but had a look in his eyes like a researcher who had just witnessed the discovery of a new fundamental force of nature. They stopped a respectful distance away, not as kings addressing a subject, but as equals approaching a fellow sovereign. "The threat is over?" Michael asked, his voice soft, as if afraid to break the fragile peace. "For now," Naruto replied, his voice raspy. He shifted his grip, pulling Ophis a little closer. "He wasn't destroyed. He was banished. He'll be back. But you broke him," Azazel said, a slow, incredulous grin spreading across his face. "His perfect, orderly logic, you smashed it with a paradox. I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just win a fight, Uzumaki. You won an argument against God's own answering machine. Do you have any idea how insane that is?" Sirzek stepped forward, his expression uncharacteristically sincere, stripped of all political calculation. "The underworld, the entire world, owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You stood against a threat that we could not. You saved us all." He gave a short, formal bow, a gesture of profound respect from a king who bowed to no one. Naruto just shook his head, his gaze never leaving Ophis's sleeping face. "I didn't do it for you. I didn't do it for your world." His voice was quiet, but it carried across the void with unshakable clarity. "I did it for her. I made a promise." His simple, honest declaration hung in the air, a statement of purpose so pure it seemed to rebuke the complex political realities they all lived by. He wasn't a hero for humanity or a champion of devils. He was a partner, keeping his word. A flash of silver light announced Valley's arrival. He was back in his human form, his clothes tattered, his body bruised, but his eyes were blazing with a fire that was not born of rage, but of exhilaration. He looked at Naruto, then at the distant, quiescent form of Great Red, and finally at the empty space where Metatron had been. "You're a monster, Naruto Uzumaki," Valley said, but the word held no malice. It was a statement of ultimate praise from a man who had dedicated his life to fighting monsters. "Not because of your power, but because you make the rest of us look like we're not even trying." He smirked. "This was the greatest fight of my life. But the next one is mine. Remember that." Without waiting for a reply, Valley turned and vanished in another flash of light, his ambition and pride sated for the moment. As if his departure were a signal, the last piece of the cosmic tableau resolved itself. Great Red, the dragon of dreams, who had been watching the entire battle with a silent, alien intensity, gave a slow, ponderous blink of his supernova eyes. He gave Naruto a final, long look, a look that was a question, an acknowledgement, and a promise of the truce, before his colossal form began to dissolve, fading back into the crimson dreamscape that was his domain, leaving the dimensional gap to its newfound peace. "We should get you and Lady Ophis to the underworld," Sirzek offered. "We have the finest healers, the best restorative magic." "No," Naruto cut him off gently. "She doesn't need magic. She just needs to rest. She needs quiet." He looked up, meeting the eyes of the three leaders. "Thank you for coming. You bought us the time we needed." It was a simple acknowledgement, but it carried the weight of a formal alliance, forged not in a treaty, but in the crucible of a desperate battle. Without another word, he gathered the last dregs of his chakra, wrapped it around himself and Ophis, and with a familiar swirl of distorted space, vanished, leaving the kings of the world alone in the silent, empty void. He reappeared in the living room of the estate, the transition jarringly mundane after the cosmic scale of the last hour. The house was just as they'd left it, silent, sterile, and still. The morning sun streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams of light. It was a scene of such perfect, domestic peace that the war he'd just fought felt like a distant, half-remembered nightmare. He walked carefully up the grand staircase, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't know which room was hers, or if she even had one, but he owned a large bedroom at the end of the hall that was just as sparse as the rest of the house, containing only a large bed with a simple black comforter. It felt right. He gently laid Ophis down on the bed, pulling the comforter over her small, still form. She looked like a child, exhausted after a long day of play, her face finally free from the weight of her eon's long struggle. He stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe, the rise and fall of her chest a quiet reassurance that they had, against all odds, survived. "You did it, kid," Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, the sound laced with a deep, bone-weary pride. "You picked a fight with 2 gods and a dragon, and you're still standing. You never do things the easy way. Someone had to," Naruto replied, a faint smile touching his lips. He pulled a chair from the corner of the room and sat it by the bed. And then, he just sat. He didn't sleep. He didn't meditate. He just watched over her, a silent, unmoving guardian. He was a dam holding back the nightmares. A wall against the chaos of the world. He was home. He didn't know how long he sat there. Hours bled into a day, then a night. The world outside continued its noisy dance. Devils reported to their kings, angels sang hymns of victory, and humanity remained blissfully unaware of the apocalypse they had narrowly avoided. But inside that room, there was only a profound, peaceful quiet. It was on the second day that her eyes fluttered open. They weren't the flat, emotionless gray orbs he had first met in the gap. They were clear, soft, and filled with a quiet, dawning light. She looked around the room, then her gaze found him, sitting by her bed, his head resting in his hand, his eyes closed but his senses alert. "Naruto," she whispered. It was the first time she had ever used her own voice to speak his name, not just her thoughts. Her voice was soft, a little hoarse, but it was real. His eyes snapped open. He leaned forward, his own voice gentle. "Hey, welcome back, sleepyhead." She slowly sat up, the comforter pooling in her lap. She looked at her hands, then around the room, then back at him. "The noise, it's gone." "Yeah," he confirmed. "Great Red is honoring the truce. He's staying in his corner of the gap. And Metatron, he's been dealt with. For now." She processed this, her gaze distant. Her entire existence, her every action for millennia, had been driven by a single, all-consuming goal: to reclaim the silence. And now, it was done. The war was over. She had won. But the victory felt different than she had imagined. "The silence," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is not empty." Naruto's heart clenched. He understood. The absolute, perfect void she had craved had been the only alternative to the pain of Great Red's chaos. It was the peace of oblivion. But what they had now was something else entirely. "No," he said softly. "It's not." She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the dawning of a universe. She was realizing, with the slow, tectonic shift of a fundamental being changing its own nature, that the silence she had sought was merely the absence of loneliness. The quiet she had found with him was full. It was full of his warmth, his unwavering presence, his ridiculous, stubborn kindness. It was a silence that was shared. "My home," she began, then stopped, correcting herself. She looked around the simple room, then at him, and a new, truer thought took its place. "Our home," as quiet. A slow, genuine smile, the first he had ever seen from her, touched her lips. It was small, hesitant, but it was the most beautiful thing he had ever witnessed. It was the dawn of a new world, right there in her eyes. He reached out and took her small, cool hand in his. Her fingers curled around his, a silent, perfect fit. A week later, the smell of miso and boiling noodles filled the sterile kitchen for the first time. Naruto stood over the stove, a wooden spoon in his hand, humming a slightly off-key tune. He wore a simple t-shirt and pants. The iconic Hokage Haori hung neatly on the back of a chair. He looked less like a world-saving demigod and more like a young man making lunch. Ophis sat at the kitchen island, watching his every move with quiet fascination. Her strength was slowly returning, her connection to her own infinity mending itself, no longer frayed but whole and calm. She was wearing a simple black dress. But she no longer looked like a lost doll. She looked like she belonged. "The secret," Naruto announced, pointing the spoon at her, "is the broth. It has to simmer. You can't rush the broth. It's a metaphor for life. Or something. He ladled the steaming, fragrant soup into 2 large bowls, piled them high with noodles, and topped them with slices of pork, a soft-boiled egg, and a sprinkle of green onions. He placed one of the bowls in front of her. It was a mountain of food, a vibrant, colorful, and very noisy-looking meal. "Behold," he said with a dramatic flourish. "The food that changes worlds. The legendary miso ramen." Ophis looked from the bowl to his proud, grinning face. She picked up the chopsticks he'd laid out for her, her movements still a little clumsy, and took her first bite. Her eyes widened. A symphony of flavors, salty, savory, rich, complex, exploded in her mouth. It was warm. It was comforting. It was real. It was the furthest thing from the conceptual cosmic dust she had subsisted on, and it was infinitely better. She searched for the word, a small, happy smile on her face. "It's loud." Naruto laughed, a real, free, unburdened laugh. "Yeah, I guess it is." As they ate, there was a polite knock on the front door. Naruto tilted his head, his senses telling him it was Rias Grimori. He got up and opened it. She stood on the doorstep, dressed in her school uniform, looking far more composed than the last time he'd seen her, but there was a new, deep respect in her eyes. "Uzumaki-san," she said with a small bow. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Call me Naruto," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "What's up, Rias?" "My brother asked me to deliver this," she said, holding out a formal, sealed scroll. It's a lot of things. A formal treaty of non-aggression. An offer of an official title, Guardian of the Balance. Resources, territory, anything you want. They're recognizing you in Ophis-sama as a new, independent faction." Naruto took the scroll but didn't open it. He just smiled. "Tell your brother I appreciate the offer. But we're not a faction. We don't want territory, and we don't need a title." He glanced back into the kitchen, at Ophis, who was happily slurping her noodles. "We've already got everything we need right here." Rias stared at him, then followed his gaze. She saw not the fearsome Ouroboros dragon, leader of terrorists, but a quiet girl enjoying a meal. She saw not a monstrously powerful anomaly, but a man who had found his peace. She finally understood. He didn't want to rule the world. He just wanted a home. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I understand. Well, if you ever need anything, Naruto, the Grimori clan will be there." "Same to you," he said. He closed the door and went back to his ramen. The politics of the world could wait. The future threats could loom. But for now, in this quiet house, in this small pocket of peace they had carved out of the universe, there was only the warm, comforting silence between two people who were no longer alone. Later that evening, they stood together, not in the house, but back in the dimensional gap. They floated hand in hand, looking out at the endless, beautiful river of creation. The gap was calm, peaceful, its colors soft and gentle. In the far, far distance, they could see a faint, crimson glow, the gentle, sleeping dream of great red. The truce held. The silence held. "Is this it?" Ophis asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Is this the peace you were always fighting for?" Naruto looked out at the silent stars that weren't stars, at the endless horizon that wasn't a horizon. He thought of Konoha, of his family, of his past. He thought of this new, chaotic world, of his new partner, of his future. He was no longer just the hero of the leaf, bound by one village, one dream. He was the sage of a new world, the partner of the infinite, a man who had found his purpose not in being a savior, but in being a companion. "No," he said, squeezing her hand gently. A slow, confident smile spread across his face, a smile that promised countless new adventures yet to come. "This is just the beginning." Chapter 10 End.